They may be a little anxious to get outside, but you know.
I will call the Village of Essex Junction Trustees meeting to order. As the agenda says, Pledge of Allegiance, we are going to skip over that, given the fact that none of us are physically there. We don't have a flag in our homes, and so we will go past that if everybody's okay with it.
Yeah.
And before we get into the meat of the agenda, I want to make a quick statement that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we will be conducting meetings remotely for the foreseeable future. We are doing our best to comply with public meeting requirements. I want to tell you about various options. Good to know the meeting is being followed and transcribed. We have for the public to follow and participate in our meetings. The town offices at 81 Main Street for today are open for the purposes of the public meetings. Staff is available in the main conference room, which is open to the public. The Board of Trustees and Selectboard are using Microsoft Teams for our remote meetings. Channel 17 is continuing to live stream the meetings on their YouTube channel. Please visit www.cctv.org for more details. And if you would like to participate remotely, please call 802-377-3784. Again, that number is 802-377-3784. You will be asked to enter a conference ID number, which is 930-802#, and again, 930-802-7 with the pound. We will continue to have public to be heard at the beginning of each meeting. Additionally, at the end of each agenda item, before the boards take any vote, we will pause and give the public an opportunity to speak. When speaking, please identify yourself with your full name for the record. So, with that said, I would also request that all members from the public, as well as all board members, please bear with us as we try and deal with this new world of going through a meeting virtually. We haven't done this before, so your patience is greatly appreciated. And with that, does anybody have any agenda additions or changes for tonight?
Andrew, I have a couple of items. This is Greg speaking, Greg Duggan. To go with item 6C, which is improved engineering services contract for Densmore Drive culvert replacement. There are two items, the contract, the final version with the attorney edits, and it's also just a red line version that you can see as well.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Okay, you got it.
So that sounded like Dan had made the motion, and who made the second?
George.
George made the second.
Okay, thanks, Amber.
No problem.
And is there any further discussion on the motion? The delay is intentional. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? As I just did that, if I remember correct, Greg, I'm going to look to you for a second. We need to do all motions via roll call, correct?
I would err on the side of caution and yes, do all by roll call.
Okay, so I'll start off. Andrew, aye. Amber,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Raj.
Aye.
That passed unanimously. Thank you. Now that will move us into the next portion of public to be heard. So this is a part of the meeting where if somebody would like to speak to the board about something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. My understanding is that there's about a 30-second delay from the time that any of us speak to the time that the public may be able to actually hear and process this. So there's going to be a period of silence. So I will give it about 45 or so seconds. If nobody wishes to speak, we will move on. So the time starts now.
Andrew, it's actually a 30 to 60-second delay, so I would give it a good 60 seconds at least.
Greg, can you wave like a mad person when that time is up?
Oh,
Yeah, just like that.
Dance.
We're gonna need music for this.
Yeah.
who's crooning? Would anyone like to buy a vowel? That's about a minute there, Andrew.
All right, great. So hearing nobody from the public wishing to be heard at this moment in time, that will move us to business item 6A, an appointment of volunteers to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee. We all have the memo?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions?
No. Caitlin, I note that Caitlin Hayes resigned, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Phoebe we're expecting her to resign as well, if she has not already done so.
Yeah.
And that produces 2 open seats. So I'm trying to figure out how to make a motion here.
Yeah.
I move that we appoint. Are we going to want to do this in executive session? Are we comfortable doing this here?
I think we need it.
Let's just do it now.
All right. I move that we appoint Seth Cronin and Patrick Leclerc to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
All right, so Raj, you made the motion, and George, I think you seconded.
That's right.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to appoint these 2 members to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee?
Do we need to be clear about who is taking which term?
That is a good point.
Yes. Yes, good point.
Looks
Friendly
like we
amendment.
would. So, yes. So George, since you
apologize.
seconded, or Raj, do you want to make an amendment here on a motion?
I would say that I would move that we appoint Seth Cronin to the term that ends June 30th, 2022, and we appoint Patrick Leclerc to the term that expires June 30th, 2021.
I'll second that.
Great. So thank you for that clarification, Amber. Great. Any other debate on that motion? Okay, before we go ahead and vote, we had said at the very beginning that for all matters, we would make sure that if public had any comments, that they would have that opportunity. So being as this is a motion and to ensure the public has an opportunity to be heard, I will start the timer now for a minute, in which if someone from the public wants to talk, go ahead and let us know. Okay, that appears to have been a minute.
Yeah, there's a minute. And Andrew, just give it a few more seconds. I just pulled up the Vermont statute. As long as votes are unanimous, you do not need a roll call vote. If they're not unanimous, that's when you need a roll call.
Great. Appreciate that. All right, so no further discussion on that motion. All those in favor of appointing these two wonderful people to the Bike Walk Advisory Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. And we thank Caitlin for her service on the Bike Walk Advisory Committee and look forward to having two new members. And that will bring us on to business item 6B, to cancel the village annual meeting.
And
so, go ahead.
And warn a meeting for April 2nd to set a new date.
Yeah.
And Greg or Evan, does somebody want to give a quick update in terms of, that's already in here, about the school district and the efforts that were taken to try and schedule these two meetings to happen at the same time?
I could take a stab. The intent of canceling the meeting and moving it is based on coronavirus and not wanting to put 150 to 200 people in the same room at the same time. So we started looking at future dates in the law, the law and future dates, and looking to see if we could try to do it on the same night as the school district, and then also make sure we vote on the same day. Unfortunately, the municipal law and the school law do not coincide with warnings.
Of course not.
So we were trying to do it the 11th of May for the village, but the school district cannot seem to get it to line up on that day. But we can line up the vote. So the school district will allow us to use the auditorium, and we can keep the 11th if we wish, and then warn the vote. We can also, we don't recommend trying to do it earlier, as we don't really know what will happen with the virus and any orders to shelter in place.
And the only other thing that I would add to that is we also don't know what the legislature may or may not do in terms of any kind of emergency capabilities that or legislation that would allow us to do this differently. So given the laws as they exist today and the guidance that we have, this is really the only thing that we can do at this point in time.
Yeah. So the law does allow for the cancellation of the village annual meeting only insofar as you are to meet the next, as soon as possible, to rewarn meeting. So because the village in its charter has voice vote at an annual meeting versus Australian ballot, you are to set a meeting. We already know we're not going to make April 1st, so we set a meeting for April 2nd, then rewarn the date, and you will be legal.
Evan, it's George. So we warned the date on April 2nd, and I'm sorry, and in the warning, we specify that it's going to be no longer be a voice vote, but it's going to be an Australian ballot vote for the budget. Is that what you're saying?
No, you have to have your floor vote on the date that you warn. If for some reason that date still does not work, you would have to go through the same process again, unless the state changes its law and allows you to do Australian ballot. They have not allowed you to do that yet.
Okay. So
Sorry.
okay, sorry.
So
No
that's
need
why,
for apologies there, George.
that's why we're recommending you meet on the 2nd and rewarn the annual meeting for the 11th.
And at the 11th, I just want to be clear, and on the 11th of May, we're assuming by that point, we're hoping, not assuming, we're hoping that by that point, the quarantine conditions will be over and we'll be able to have more than 10 people in a room to gather together to hold a voice vote on the village budget. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Or the state gives guidance different than what they've given us today. The second part is if you cancel that future meeting, the next opportunity is you have to warn it no sooner than 30 days and no more than 40 days from the date that you rewarn. So that would give us to June. So we have 2 shots at this.
Okay.
So just, we do, if May doesn't work, we do still have some time, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Right.
And we're thinking that if we get bumped out of the second date, the legislature will be forced to make some kind of accommodation.
I wouldn't count
Because
on that.
they'll be adjourned at that point, most likely.
Well,
So along,
they'll-
hey Evan, hang on a quick second. Along those lines, the Senate Government Ops Committee, they have been discussing this. I don't know what today's discussion resulted in, but I know that municipalities and VLCT have been advocating for changes to issues just like this, as well as the ability to have a board change from a voice vote to an Australian vote or an Australian ballot for issues like budgets. So these are things that I know they're talking about. Nothing has passed from Senate yet, as far as I'm aware of. Greg, Evan, I don't know if you know of any other updates other than that.
do not.
I do not.
I mean, I feel better knowing that they're working on it. So I think I don't think we have much choice but to move forward with this change at all. So
Yeah, we do. I just only will say it's unfortunate that you just, for the sake of communicating the whole thing to the public, it'd be great if you just have one simple, comprehensive message instead of saying, okay, here's what's going to happen in a couple of weeks. We're going to cancel this, and then maybe something else is going to happen. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But there's nothing we can do about it, I guess. So, okay. So we're planning then. Nothing's going to. So first of all, we need to. It sounds like though we need to get the word out and make sure that the general public in the village, no one actually wanders over to the high school on April 1st and rattles the door trying to get in, because we are intentionally not holding the meeting, so that triggers us to have warn the next meeting. Correct. So we do want to at least warn people about that the annual meeting is not going to be held. So how are you going to message this?
We'll be publicizing it tomorrow, all the normal channels, Front Porch Forum, the website. Sure we can get on Facebook. We'll notify the reporter.
I assume you're gonna put a note on the door at the high school as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Do that.
Okay.
Is there any concern about doing a mailer, and while we only get about 100 to 200 people to show up, and sending a mailing to 4,000 or so households may be a little excessive? Is that something that's in the budget to be able to do so, to again just make sure that people get all opportunities to see it, because not everybody has the internet. I can tell you personally, I don't get the reporter, so if I don't go online and actively seek it, I don't get it.
I think given the current state, I mean, I would assume they're more than aware of the fact that you cannot gather. And so I would assume people realize we can't do this, period. Yeah. Like we don't legally, we can't even do it. So I don't know that a mailing is really necessary.
I would say I would say a mailing would be good when we finally, or when the government ops committee or whoever finally gets their act together. No criticism intended there, and we actually know when the vote is going to happen. Then you send out your mailer. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if we only get one shot at it to make sure people show up and or whatever, I'd say you want that to happen when the actual opportunity to vote on the budget. That's my 2 cents anyway. And it sounds like we don't know when that's going to happen yet. Correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Good
Does
one.
anybody have any other questions or concern?
Sounds like
Okay,
a good.
would someone like to, before we make the motion, we should open this back up to the public. So again, I will start the timer in just a moment. So now is the point in time where if anybody would like to speak about this agenda item of canceling village meeting and postponing it to a later date, now is the time to do so, and the minute will start now.
And Andrew, just a note, I've been keeping track. Your 30-second delay is at max. So.
Thanks, Raj.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to contribute as a member of the public.
Hi, Elaine.
Hello, Lane. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. I was poking around
Get
VLCT.
your full name for the record, please.
Yeah.
Elaine Haney, Dunbar Drive.
Thank you.
So the Senate bill and the House bill has provisions in it that will allow municipalities the legislative body of a municipality may apply the Australian ballot system to any or all of its municipal elections held in the year 2020. The Secretary of State may waive statutory deadlines or provisions set forth in school district articles of agreement related to elections necessary for Australian ballot. So it sounds like if this bill passes, then we will have the ability to switch right over to Australian ballot simply by having the trustees vote on it. And finally, they're also included in this bill is a provision where you don't have to have an individual present in the public space like Evan and Greg are right now. The entire meeting can be online.
Good news, Lane. Thanks.
So hopefully that will get
Very
passed
helpful.
in the near future.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay,
Can I
and
ask-
is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak?
I can make a motion.
Hang on a quick second, Raj. Well, I'd say about 10 more seconds. All right, Raj, why don't you go ahead?
I move that the trustees authorize staff to issue public notices that the annual village meeting will not be held on April 1st and April 14th, but that the trustees will schedule a special meeting on April 2nd for the purposes of adopting a new warning for an annual meeting date expected to be May 11th and May 19th.
And
I'll
is there a
second
second
that.
on that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you again, George. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you all. Appreciate your understanding in this odd time. And that will move us on to business item 6C about engineering services for Densmore Drive.
I'll take this one. Jim would be available by phone if necessary. As you all know, Densmore Drive washed out in the big storm of Halloween Eve night, and we have applied for FEMA funding, and this is the engineering firm that is qualified to do the engineering work. Normally we would use Hamlin. but we have to go through a process. And so Jim worked on this and ran it through council, Claudine Safar's office, and she's comfortable with this, and it's before you for review and approval.
Great. I do have a couple of questions. The first one being, typically when we award bids like this, there's a little bit more of an explanation as to why this recipient, so why Hoyle, Tanner and Associates versus any of the others who had applied. Can you provide a little detail on that?
Jim, if you're listening, do you want to chime in here?
Can you folks hear me?
Yes, Jim.
Yep.
We can.
Okay.
Hello, Jim.
Hi, Jim. How you doing?
Hi. Thank you for having me in tonight. Excuse me. Hoyle Tanner came across as the most qualified in many respects, and it was unanimous from everybody that reviewed the packages. They are the one that coordinated the fast track reconstruction of the Shunpike Road Bridge in Williston, South Burlington on the town line. So they not only had the experience, but it was recently proven with the wipeout of that bridge during that same storm.
Oh. Okay.
Great. That's appreciated, Jim. I know I took a look at their website, and they certainly do appear to have a significant amount of experience in this work. Another question I had, it talks about that approximately $36,000 will come from our funds. Is this coming out of the capital fund, or is this coming out of other sources?
The assumption on my part would be we have to work that out, but this is already in the capital plan and is something that would be considered as part of the road reconstruction there, but that's ultimately up to you folks to decide along with finance.
Okay. And then would there be any, I'm not sure if this is more for Sarah, would there be any impacts on the capital plan if this comes out of the capital budget in terms of delaying other projects?
Hey, this is Sarah. That's a really good question. Andrew and I have not had an opportunity to look into it, but I can do that here tomorrow or something and let you guys know.
Thank you. I mean, I assume for $36,000, that's not something that would delay Lamoille, which I believe is the one project that's supposed to be done this year. But yeah, it would just be helpful to have that confirmed or not at another point.
To respond to that, Andrew, the cash flow, we are still not proceeding with the Railroad Ave water line and some of the related costs there. So that I believe there should be enough, but that would be for Sarah to verify.
Oh, good point.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions from the board?
I think the only question I had was whether Claudine had reviewed it, but that got answered earlier.
All of her comments were accepted by this firm.
Okay.
Okay. Any other board members have any other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion.
Before you do that, Dan, just need to give time for the public. So now is the time to do so. I'll start the clock now. So if anybody from the public wants to speak to this item, now is the time to do so.
And thanks for being available.
Great. So that appears to be the time frame. It seems like nobody wished to speak. So Dan, you want to make that motion?
Okay, I make a motion that the trustees award, let's see here. Trustees award the engineering services contract for the Densmore Drive culvert replacement to Hoyle, Tanner, and Associates.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? That appears to have passed unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to all of the staff who were a part of this, and especially with the collaboration that was very clear between the town and the village on getting this accomplished and seeking the FEMA funding for this. So it's greatly appreciated. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim. This seemed really quick too.
Okay. So Jim, thank you again. And that will bring us on to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay.
That was
this is a
second
consent
by-
agenda. Do we?
That was the second by whom?
Raj.
Raj, thank you.
Sure.
Given that this is the consent agenda, do we again need to give the 45-second delay?
No.
Is now joining.
All right, so then I think you said no, so let's go ahead and all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great, hearing none, that passes unanimously, which brings us into the reading file. And if we could do this by roll call again, that would just be greatly appreciated for order's sake. And I'll start off, and the only thing that I wanted to do is, besides thank the town and village staff for all of their hard work these past few weeks with COVID, the lack of clarity from the federal government, not pointing fingers, just saying that with the lack of clarity and direction, really appreciated how staff stepped up, have made some tough decisions in doing what is best for the overall health and welfare of our community, as well as for the town and village staff members who keep this municipality running at such a high level and such a great path forward. So I really appreciate all of your efforts and communication on this to the board, as well as the communication out to the public. So thank you all. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was in relation to the consent agenda with the paving highway grant. It would be good to know, or to have in a public place on the website, which roads are going to be repaved. So that way, if anybody has any questions, it's easier just to point them out to the village website and say, these are the roads being paved this year. If your road isn't on there, then it's not your turn yet. If it's on there, then you won that lottery.
We can do that.
Great. That was all that I had. So going in order of faces.
Is now
Going in
joining.
order of faces that I am seeing. Amber, was there anything you wanted to discuss?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Raj, your face is next.
Nothing to add.
Dan, your face is next.
Nothing.
And George?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. And then staff.
Nothing.
Now, just, you all know what we've been doing with COVID-19. We just got the governor's next executive decision, and we'll have an update for the next meeting. But most of the staff has already been assigned their tasks during reductions in our staffing in person. So this isn't a big shock to anybody. That's it.
Great. Was there anything else?
Not for staff.
Okay. So then that will conclude the trustees portion of tonight's meeting. We still have some time until the start of the select board meeting, and I don't know if all the select board members are present.
We're actually
What I would say,
you can jump right into it whenever you're ready.
are all the select board members present?
Yes, we are.
Hey, Greg, it was pointed out to me about 15 minutes ago that the packet for the meeting is not on the website.
Okay, that's a surprise. I thought it was. Let me
I
see
think
if
I saw it there.
It's not on the town website under the select board, at least, where select board packets normally go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. Not sure what happens. Let me check the village website. We can direct people to essexjunction.org, and I'm going to be having the packet pulled up through share screen that people can follow as well.
Can I ask a point of order here? It's George.
Yes.
Is it under open meeting law, is it necessary to have the entire packet, all the background information, minutes, etc., posted to a public space, or just the agenda?
I believe it is just the agenda.
Exactly.
I agree with Greg.
But if people are interested, if anybody's listening, you can go to essexjunction.org. I do apologize for the error. Go to essexjunction.org. Under the top menu, you'll see boards and meetings. Actually, I'm going to try to share it in case anybody's watching right now.
Stay put.
So here's the essexjunction.org, boards and meetings. Board of Trustees is a drop-down menu. Takes you to this page. If you scroll down, we have right here, right above the 2020 meeting minutes, 324 joint agenda and meeting packet. If you click on that, it opens up. Like I said, I will have the packet pulled up and I'll share a screen so people can follow along throughout the meeting.
I'm having a online meeting.
So, Greg, if I can ask a quick question of clarity. I see that on the website it says that there's a revised packet. Was that emailed out to us?
Oh, really? It's on the
Sorry, which packet are you looking at now?
It's just a
joint meeting,
revised,
I just saw
just
when
a
you
revised
quickly-
agenda. It's a revised agenda. It has a big banner on the top of it about COVID-19.
It's the agenda.
Oh, that's going to be different?
The agenda's been revised, not the packet, so there's a call-in number for the public.
Okay. That's helpful. I only asked because the one that I have in front of me that I'm following for the meeting does not have, or is not that revised one, so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to miss anything.
Nope, just a call-in number. We didn't have that when we warned the meeting.
Great.
So if anybody's calling in, here's the number to call and the conference ID that you'll be asked to punch in.
Okay, great. And so did we want to go ahead and get started with the joint meeting?
I'd say yes.
I feel ready.
If we can do this by, first off, since it's not quite the time, if boards don't mind, I'll go through the village trustees. If you can each just say whether you're ready, since I can't actually see you at this point. So I'll do the roll call that way. Amber, are you ready?
Ready?
George, are you ready? George, I saw your lips move, but your voice didn't come in. Okay, George is ready.
Thumbs up.
George's mic is muted.
Dan,
Yes.
Dan, are you ready?
Ready.
Great. Roger, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, yes, trustees are ready. Elaine, do you want to do the same for the select board?
I'll do the same for the select board. Andy, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Andy looks ready.
Max Levy, are you with us? I see your avatar, so maybe you're muted, Max?
Max, there's muted, yeah.
All systems go.
Thank you, Max. Pat, are you present?
I am here, yes.
Annie Cooper.
I am here and ready to go. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are all present and accounted for.
Great. Then on that moment then, I would say the trustees, we are back in session. And Chairwoman Haney.
I will call the Select Board meeting of March 24th to order.
Great. Thank you all for joining. I'm just going to read a quick statement. So we appreciate everybody on this call for joining us this evening. Due to COVID-19, the pandemic, we will be conducting meetings remotely for the foreseeable future. We are doing our best to comply with public meeting requirements. I want to tell you about various options we have for the public to follow and participate in our meetings. The town offices at 81 Main Street are open for the purposes of the public meeting tonight. Staff is available in the main conference room, which is open to the public. The Board of Trustees and Select Board are using Microsoft Teams for our remote meetings. Channel 17 is continuing to live stream the meetings on their YouTube channel. Please visit www.cctv.org for more details. Again, that is www.cctv.org for more details. And if you would like to participate remotely, please call 802-377-3784. That phone number again is 802-377-3784. You will be asked to enter a conference ID number, which is 930-802-7, followed by the pound key. Again, that is 930-802-7, followed by the pound key. We will continue to have public to be heard at the beginning of each meeting. Additionally, at the end of each agenda item, before the boards take any action or take any vote, and we will pause to give the public an opportunity to speak. When speaking, please identify yourself with full name for the record. Thank you all for that and for that little indulgence. So do we have any agenda additions or changes for tonight?
We do not.
I would like to make a change to the agenda.
Yes.
I thought I heard Greg speaking. Greg, did you have something?
Staff has nothing.
This is Sarah. I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. Oops. I'm looking at the participant screen to the right-hand side, Greg. I don't know if you're showing participants. Someone was in the lobby. It appears like they're in.
The 81 Main Street.
Dennis Lutz.
Is now joining.
Okay. I am finished.
Are we okay?
It's all good. The person in the lobby was let in, and I believe it was Dennis. So we're good. This is Sarah. I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, Dennis. I would like to amend the agenda to move business item 6E, COVID-19 update, to the top of the agenda. I think that's probably a lot more important than the rest of the business on the agenda, and I think given the timely changes that are happening, we need to discuss that first. That's my motion.
So moved. Max.
Second, Patrick.
All apologies for not calling for the motions and the seconds. All those in favor of amending the agenda on the Select Board?
Aye.
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 All right.
Was it everybody on your board?
That was everybody on our board.
My dog agrees too.
Great. So for the trustees, would someone like to make a similar motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Raj.
Dan moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of amending the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you all.
So why don't we go ahead and jump into it?
Well, we have public to be heard.
Thank you so much. So now is a portion of the meeting in which if anybody from the public would like to speak to the boards about something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. If you would like to speak to the boards about something that is on the agenda, we promise you there will be ample time for that. What we have been told is that there's an approximate 30-second delay from the time that you hear this, or from the time that I actually say it to the time that you hear it. And so because of that, I'm going to be pausing for about 30 seconds to give the public time to speak. And if nobody would like to, then we will move on to the agenda.
Oh,
so the clock will start now.
I got a problem though. I just got notified by somebody that the code that's on the CCTV screen is not the same one that Andrew gave out. So there are people that are on the wrong phone link trying to connect to the meeting.
Sure, this is Greg. You're having some last minute changes today. I'm guessing that's what it is. Let me get in touch with Channel 17 and see if they can update it.
Channel 17 is, I've got it open on my screen and they're showing the header of the agenda. So the phone number and the conference ID are what's written on the agenda.
They also match. I'm not sure what, I'm looking at the note on the left side in the YouTube page and our agenda, and they appear to me to match.
Yeah.
Can I please just check with Andrew that I'm correct at the number, or with anyone, that it's 802-377-3784, and the code is 9308027 hashtag or pound.
Correct.
Thank you.
Huh.
That is what I put up
So
on. And the code is 9308027 hashtag or pound.
Rick Jones
Is now joining.
The screen shows two call-in numbers. It shows the old call-in number also. And so that's the problem, is that there's both numbers, the old one and the new one, are both showing on the Channel 17 screen.
I'm not seeing that at all.
Well, it's below. So it's in the text below, in the description beneath the video in Channel 17. They never took out or weren't notified or didn't get to that page. So,
the joint meeting call-in.
right,
Okay,
Trustees
got
and
it.
Select Board call-in is incorrect. So I'm not sure that Channel 17 or we can change that at this point.
Andy, if you're being reached out to by the public at your where you are, perhaps you can respond to them to use the trustee meeting information.
I did.
Thank you.
I've also posted.
So what I would suggest is, if the board is okay, why don't we give it another 30 seconds to see if anybody from the public would like to be heard, and if the boards are okay, why don't we just continue as we move along? And if somebody would like to speak to something because of connection issues, they can do so later. 81 Main Street, our
Dennis Lutz
Is now exiting.
Hey, Andrew, this is Evan.
Yeah.
I stepped out of the room. What are we doing now?
Just to give those who, from the public who wanted to speak to something, or to speak to the boards about something that is not on the agenda, that they could do so right now. And then for those who may have had connection issues, to still have that opportunity again later on at the end of the business items.
Thank you.
That sounds great. I'm trying to connect with Channel 17 to see if they can update their scrolling message too.
Okay, does anybody have access to the lobby? There's also now people saying they're waiting in the lobby and not being connected.
All right, let me jump on that. I'm trying to share screens, and when I do that, I can't see the lobby. So if anybody sees that, just speak up, and I'll jump in and allow that.
There don't appear to be anyone in the lobby currently.
I don't see anybody.
Those folks were allowed in or were added to the meeting, excuse me, a few minutes ago.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Ricky, we can hear you.
Okay, I was able to join on that email that Tammy sent out earlier, and the conference ID number works for me, just FYI.
Who is it? Ricky.
Thank you, Rick.
All right.
Okay, I'm going back to mute.
Bye, Rick.
Great. So was there anybody else from the public who wished to speak to the boards tonight?
Can anybody hear me?
Andrew, I just admitted.
Dennis Lutz
Is now joining.
Andrew, might I suggest you ask that question again?
Andy, was that you that was just saying something?
Yes, I was suggesting you ask your question again because I just admitted somebody from the lobby.
Sure, I can. I would say if we do it this one more time, and then afterwards, this would be the last time until the end of our business items, just so that way we can move some of these things forward. So for those who have just joined, if there is something that you would like to speak to the boards about tonight that is not on the agenda, again, this would be for any discussion item that is not on the agenda. Now is the time to do so. I will pause approximately 30 seconds, as I understand there is a delay, to make sure there is ample time for you to identify yourselves. So now is the time to do so. Okay, so based on the timer on my computer, that was 45 seconds. Nobody had said that they wanted to speak, so we can move ahead into the business items. And Elaine, I believe you're going to take it from here.
Sure. So we had an agenda amendment. So we're going to talk about item 6E as actually item 6A. So Evan and Greg, can you give us an update on what's going on in the town and village regarding COVID-19?
Today, this is Evan. Today we have done a lot of planning with the departments. The PD is up and running as usual. They have gone, like a bunch of us, we've split our teams in our departments. We want to keep as many people healthy and safe as possible, so, and try to not
Is now joining.
get people who may get infected to infect an entire department. So we have split our times and our places of where we work. So most of us are able to work remotely. So we are trying not to be in our buildings at the same time. So the police are up and running, administration is up and running, finance is up and running, clerk's office, the 2 community developments are available. Our buildings are closed to public walk-in, but you can make appointments. Our public works plowed the streets last night. PD is able to respond to calls. And now the governor, as of tonight and for tomorrow at 5 o'clock, is asking people to stay at home. So only essential personnel will be in our buildings. We're going to keep paying our employees, and they're going to be doing work from home. And our buildings get disinfected. We have a sprayer that comes in. I think we're doing most of our buildings at least twice a week.
Great. Do any board members have any questions or comments?
This is Max. I just want to thank Evan and Greg and the other staff for taking these measures. There's no playbook for how you do this, and I know you're working with your colleagues in other towns, and I just want to thank you for working to help make our staff and our community a safer place.
Thank you. We also, thank you. To add, we closed the senior center early on as they appeared to be the most affected in the population. We tried to keep the senior van running as long as we could. That lasted about a week. All of our drivers are aged and they were caring for others. We have not seen a dramatic drop off in staff, but it is still early days. And we do have a significant amount of walk-in traffic at 81 Main because of the records, people doing refinancing, title changes, marriage license, death certificates, and the like. And because of up until recently, until the federal government said you could do your your income taxes later than April 15th, we were seeing a lot of people asking for copies of their property taxes. But now, since the government has moved that back, we are hopeful that that will slow down. We are asking people to do things with us by phone or by email.
Okay.
Evan, this is Amber. So I'm assuming that, I mean, the order just came out, so maybe you haven't thoroughly been able to review it, but I assume that based on the order, the town clerk's office is actually now going to be closed, not because they're not essential.
Right.
There is an exemption under number 8 that we want to look at.
Okay.
I think we want to stay closed to the public. I want to talk with the clerk about how she and her office may want to handle some of this. If we can, we might try to do some very limited office hours. If we cannot, we're going to have to deal with it. But normally we don't have, they come in, they do their thing, they go into the records vault. But again, we want to try to make sure the public is safe and our staff is safe. So I want to talk to her. This just came out late this afternoon. So I'll be talking to her first thing tomorrow.
I would think that things like title searches, while very important, are not falling under the qualification of essential business. So I would be concerned that the public was still coming into the vault.
Yeah, that's my read on it too, Elaine, is my understanding was that it was going to be exempt. It is not exempt under the current order, so.
Right, there may be revised guidance.
I share this concern that that which is not essential. I think as leaders of our community, not just us, but all of us, the town and everything, that we need to be as thorough as possible, while not, of course, impeding upon essential things. Thank you.
Evan, I'm noticing on Front Porch Forum some commentary about dog licenses being due April 1st. Is there any discussion around extending that deadline?
We will not be charging any penalties if it's after April 1st. There's a new exception date that I think we're doing. But people can still do it by mail. They can do it by email. But we're not enforcing that in any way on April 1st. We just keep the deadline, so just in case people want to get it done. But there'll be a grace period.
Okay. I mentioned this during the trustee meeting. There is some legislation under discussion at the State House allowing municipalities to conduct online meetings without requiring a staffer to be in the building and allowing the public in, and allowing public meetings to be held entirely online. So that bill is still under discussion, but I would not be surprised if it's passed sometime in the near future. So that will alleviate some of the logistics that we experienced setting this meeting up.
Thank you, Elaine. I think it's so important that we do our best to keep all people from having to go and be somewhere unnecessarily. And thank you to Greg and Evan for being such good partners that you had a good to be together in that room. Thank you so much.
It looks like 6 feet.
Not judging you.
I moved closer just in case because I feel like I'm shouting.
I can help you, Evan. I have ways to shout.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding COVID-19?
I would just like to say, this is Raj from the Trustees, I'd just like to say the communication that we've been provided from Evan and Greg and everyone has been excellent and very much appreciated. Obvious that a lot of work and thought has gone into this, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'd be remiss. We really our department heads have been spectacular. They have come up with some really good ideas. They've been on the ball. Anything we've asked of them, they've jumped on it. Chief Gary, who's our emergency operations coordinator, director, has been phenomenal. Dennis, all of them. There's nothing if we asked, somebody ran it to ground. So it's been great to work with them. Not so much the event.
Right. And I'll just chime in, not just department heads, all staff have really been cooperative, willing to work. People are just doing what they need to do. It's just, we have a good team all the way around. And I apologize for texting right now. I'm trying to get kinks worked out. So I am listening. I'm also trying to communicate with Channel 17. It sounds like that fix is in place now.
And our unions have been very good to work with as well. The other thing that coming up this week, I'm trying to find some time. So I'd like to find some type of event or participation from the village and town staff, whether it's a food drive, blood drive, or both, something that we can help give back to the community.
That's an excellent idea.
So I'll keep posted on that.
All right. Okay, so unless there are further questions or comments, let's pause for 45 seconds to see if anyone from the public who's listening or watching has questions or comments on our COVID-19 discussion.
Elaine, this is Max, just real quick.
Sure.
I've gotten messages from the Red Cross that they really are desperate for blood drives. So that would be a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Thank you, Max.
We'd have to follow. We'd have to follow very deeply all the rules. But I agree with Max that is something that we don't want to have become a terrifying emptiness in the midst of all the other things we're doing.
So Max, are you suggesting that we coordinate with the Red Cross to host a blood drive here in the town?
I would, if Evan's thinking of doing something like that, I would suggest to contact the Red Cross blood group in Burlington to see how to do that. And my guess is they would prefer to have you go to their site, but I would just coordinate with the Red Cross blood folks in Burlington on how to do that, because Annie's right. It's very different situation now, but they have a way to do it because of the desperate need they have right now to get blood.
I'm so happy for that clarification, because my chest was pretty tight trying to imagine orchestrating that. So I'm really glad to hear that your intention was that we work within the circumstances already in place for such a thing, and we do so safely and wisely. But also, Max, it's a very great point. There's a lot of talk online about blood and the need for it. So I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear that it's a more cautious approach than I was first understanding. Thank you, Elaine, for getting that clarification.
Any further questions or comments on COVID-19 before we open it up to the public? Okay, I'm going to give it 45 seconds for the public. If you're listening or watching and you have any questions or comments, now would be the time.
And if anybody in the public is here looking to speak, you'll need to unmute your microphones.
Ken Signorello is now exiting.
Hey, Dan, have those snacks.
Okay, we can move on to the next agenda item.
I'd like some chips, Dan.
Do you have some for the rest of the class, Dan?
Yes.
What are we having? Wait.
Just mute your mic, okay? We don't want to hear you crunching.
Those are very healthy.
Sorry, Dan. I just enjoyed that so much.
Elaine, that's a good point. Perhaps we should all mute our mics until the time that we have something to say. Would that be okay?
Yes, that also helps with barking dogs and washing machines. So, yeah. Next item on the agenda, discuss recommendations from Governance Subcommittee memo and draft transition provisions. I'm assuming, George, that you're going to want to speak first to talk about the memo?
If I have to.
I just assumed. It doesn't have to be you.
I'm happy to have Max do it, or Andy or Raj. But I'm going to guess that they'll probably turn it back over to me. I think I've said, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I think both at the last trustee meeting and the last select board meeting, I said the same thing that I'm going to say now, which is, let me say first and foremost, under the present circumstances, I see this whole thing, personal opinion, as extremely low priority right now. That being said, I guess we don't want to lose sight of it altogether, but we've reached a point here where we need to, the subcommittee is just a recommending, investigating body. We're not ultimately a decision-making body. So we need we need both elected boards to give us guidance about what we're actually going to put into the, either the charter or the transition portion of the charter. And those things are representation model and taxation districts and our taxation tax reconciliation recommendations. What is the board's pleasure? Do you want to go ahead with our, as we recommended, our 2-2-3 model, or do you want to change that to a 3-3 model or a 3-3-1 model? And additionally, do you want us to include some, all, or none of our tax reconciliation? And we still haven't come up with a better word for it, so that's what I'm going to keep calling it until we do. Our taxing mechanisms. Do you want, because we have a rough idea of what the savings would be and what the numbers would be, but we don't want to go ahead and have staff really put those numbers and algorithms together until we get guidance from the board that these are the things that indeed you want to see us do. And then the other piece was to have everybody look at the transition portion of the charter that we've written so far. Take a look at it. Are you comfortable with all the language? Do you understand everything that's being said? And is it okay? Because if it's all good, then we're going to stick with that language. There are still a few unfinished pieces of work in there, but we would like to get to those, and we'd like to finalize the things that are kind of up in the air right now. So maybe the best thing to do is to bring it back to a discussion about the representation model in light of the everything that's happened. First of all, the petition and vote to amend the Town of Essex Charter to 3-3, and now with the legislature on hiatus, whether that you're even going to have a decision about that. I'm going to guess it probably isn't very high priority for them, the same way it's not high priority for us. So you could very much not have any kind of a decision from the Government Ops Committee for a while. It's entirely possible they put this on hold for the rest of the year. So I'd like to hear some discussion from the rest of you about this and where you want us to go with this.
Thank you, George.
Yep.
So we'll tackle representation model first before we move on to any of the other.
Yep.
Just to keep it organized.
Yep.
So I'll open it up to the select board. What are your thoughts, folks?
Can I go?
Absolutely, Annie.
A little bit, I think that, so I phrase this politely. I think that the work that the world is doing now, the work that the world is doing now, is so very important. And I think that the work that Essex is doing now is included in that. And I think that we are learning a lot about ourselves through this very difficult work that we're all doing now. And I would like to think that our answers might become more clear to us in this type of discussion as we work together through what we're working through the pandemic now. And so I almost feel as though this conversation is a little early for us to exactly say, because we will learn a lot about ourselves as we grow forward through this pandemic. If that makes any sense.
Okay. Patrick or Max or Andy?
Yeah, this is Max, if I can speak. You know, when we put the representative model together, the two and three, it was based on the survey and input that way. But what we just went through recently was that vote, and that vote, you know, you can argue whether people were totally informed or not, but it kind of doesn't matter. There was a vote taken, a legal vote, and it was a 3-3-0. My take would be that that's a very good model to put in to our plan, because that has a lot of data behind it. And I think if we put in something different, when the legislature goes to look at what we've done and they see this other vote happened and yet we have something different in here, it's gonna be a hiccup for the legislature. So I think from my perspective, though, I really don't like the 3-3-0, but it's really not, that doesn't matter at this point. I think the right thing to do, based on the vote, and again, the legislature's perspective, which I think they would have, is to go with the 3-3. And that's a transitional thing, right? We have that model, whatever model we were going to put in there for 5 years, and who knows? Maybe that turns out to be actually a good thing.
Well, if I can I speak to that?
Of course.
I think that when we initially said that, and then we said we would have a representation model of 2-2-3, and we would consider it a transitional model. And then the new board would have 5 years to figure out a new representation scheme, and we sent that down to the Government Ops Committee, and we also had Dan Richardson review it. And it really came back to us that no, you can't do that. What you can say is that you can have a scheme and a representation plan in there that will last for 5 years, and then at the end of 5 years, then you will go to an all at large thing. But you can't say, you can't have a condition in there. You can't say in the charter, if the board, if the 5 member, the newly elected board doesn't do something within 5 years, and this is, I know it's a minor technical point, then something happens. You can't have they said you can't have contingency language in there. You just have to say the new select board is in place for 5 years. It shall have this district model, 3 from the village, 3 from the town, or whatever. And then at the end of 5 years, it becomes an all-at-large board. Boom. You can't have, if it doesn't make a decision, then this happens. I just wanted to clarify that. Right. It's implied that obviously the new board can at any time it wants institute a charter change proposal and change the charter and ask the legislature to revise the charter to allow some kind of a different model. And if you'll notice in the transition charter that we wrote, Ann and I put on a piece at the very, very end, which says that one of the very first things that the new board shall do is appoint a ward committee to investigate wards and districts and come up and just to potentially recommend an alternative model to the 3-3 model or the 3-3-1 model or the 2-2-3 model or whatever it is that's there. And I don't know if everyone caught that. I'm assuming you all did, because I know you've all read this transitional charter and know it by heart, and because you all did your homework, right? But in case you haven't, we will get to that. But I just wanted to correct that, and I'm being a little long-winded, but I just want to correct what we initially said, that if the new board doesn't do something by 5 years, then this happens. You can't have that kind of language. You just have to say the new board rules for 5 years, and then after 5 years, it becomes all at large. And then it's implied that the new board would have to do something in that 5-year period. I don't know if everyone understands what I'm saying.
Right. This is Max. Right, George. That's actually what I meant to say. Is that we would keep everything the same except take the 2-2-3 out and put in a 3-3-0 and keep everything else the same. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
No. Okay. Thanks, Max. Yeah. No problem.
Pat or Andy?
I actually agree with Max with one caveat, in that my biggest concern about 3-3 is the potential for ties, and that still remains. I think we do have a pretty solid community consensus with this most recent vote that if we go forward with this, it would be really advantageous for us to take advantage of a 3-3, since that seems to be what the communities want. I'm wondering if I would be most comfortable if there was a tie-breaking vote mechanism, even if they weren't a full voting member, which I realize is kind of like a weak mayor system. But if there was a single at-large representative who only voted to break ties, I mean, I don't know how that would come into place. Maybe it's even too far out there, this far along in the process. But I'm wondering if this goes to the State House, if they're going to look at a model presented as was recently voted with 3-3 and then say exactly what I'm thinking. The potential for a tie vote is just too great. You guys need to come up with something else, because no other community in the state has set themselves up like that. And I mean, we just don't know the answer, and it's unfortunate, but I would like to know the answer to that, and I wish we had it.
Yeah. And if I can respond to that, Elaine, would that be okay?
Sure, Max.
It's George.
George.
That's all right. I think that you're exactly right, and I'm concerned about not having a tiebreaker in there. I was just thinking the other night, what's the very first thing a board does? Very first thing that a board does is they elect a chair. Well, what if you have 3 people that want one chair and 3 people that want another chair? There you go. You're dead in the water. So I agree. I think what we could do potentially is put 3-3 in there, but also be in touch with the government ops committee and make it clear to them that we understand this is controversial, that we're asking for something that's a little unprecedented. And if they wish to revise it, we wouldn't be that unhappy. If they thought, well, no, you need to add one more person who's elected at large as a tiebreaker, we would say, fine. Keep in mind, the GovOps committee can do anything they want to the charter. Our charter that we vote on that is really, in a sense, a recommendation to them. It's a proposal, but they can get to revise it pretty much any way they want. So I think if the charter is approved and there's a 3-3 model in there, representation model in there, but we are also in communication with them, and if we bring that all down to them, but we make it clear that we understand this is controversial, and they say would like to revise it, then we say fine. We'd be prepared to say it's going to be 3 from the village, 3 from the town, and 1 elected at large. That none of us, I don't believe, would be that upset over that.
No, I think if there's allowance, like if we have that open communication between government ops and ourselves during the process, then I would be very comfortable with a 3-3 submittal as Max proposed.
This is Well, I guess I can wait for the village to go. Yeah,
Raj,
please.
can I ask you to hold your thought until Andy's had a chance to speak? Andy, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I've previously commented that I thought that merger and representation should be separated, since they're two different decisions. And I think that we already have a very decisive vote in support of 3-3, and given that, I don't think we should include it in this proposal. I mean, I don't think we should include any information about it in this proposal. One thing that could happen is if merger fails, then you've got one vote that says yes, we want 3-3, and one vote that says we don't want 3-3, right? So I think they need to be independent actions going to the legislature to review and make decisions on. So I would encourage us to leave out the final representation model altogether, and have it be covered by the previous the vote.
Well, I'm not sure we can do that, Andy, because the vote at town meeting day was particular just to the select board, and this is a select board decision. It's a select board decision. This how the town is governed, isn't it? In a merger scenario where the town and another municipality are coming together, then those two municipalities are equal partners in the conversation and would have to weigh in evenly, I believe.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
So what I was trying to say is this vote was about the town select board. You're quite right. But a merger vote would be about merging two governments together. And so both governments need to have a plan for how to merge both of them together. And so we would be bringing a town select board that has a 3-3 model together with a village trustee board that has an at-large model. And then we have to figure out how to merge those.
Well, you wouldn't merge those because you'd have a new board elected when the charter is put in place, right? So we're not taking people who are doing one job and giving them another job. Everybody will be newly elected when this new board takes charge of this new charter.
That's true. Go ahead.
So I don't see. I mean, we already have. What do we do if the merger fails and we've got this 3-3 plan baked into it that's already been approved? How's that going to work?
If merger fails, then we stay with the select board as 3-3 and the trustees stay as a board of at-large with 5.
Right, I see that as a non-issue.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I think go ahead, Andy.
No, I just don't think we need to have the language in here twice. I mean, if it's already been it's already being considered by the legislature, why are we spending a lot of time putting language in here that's going to cover something that's already been voted on?
Well, the legislature's not the only audience we're thinking about at the moment. At least the only audience I'm thinking about. There's been a vote, and the residents have said they want 3-3. So if we turn around and submit a proposal for merger that does not contain 3-3, that is taking what the public said and ignoring it. So I don't feel comfortable doing that. I feel we should also have 3-3 in the merger document. And I think that's really what I'm trying to say, is that in spite of the fact that this was a select board vote that referred to the town governing body, if we move forward with a merger plan that our voters also have to vote on, and the representation plan they voted on in March didn't get included, our voters may not be inclined to vote for merger.
I'd like to speak, please.
Yes, please, Annie.
And also, I'm a little sad that I didn't get to hear what Raj had to say, because I think it would have stimulated my thought further, but I understand that this is how we normally do it. We do it this and then that, and then a joint conversation. I'm just talking.
Yes.
I have a thought about, to be honest with you, I am super confused. But your last statement helped me a little. I feel a little bit like someone just yanked the rug out from under me, that we took that vote about our strong feelings about the 3-3, and now I feel a little bit like I just got off a merry-go-round, to be honest with you, by my fellow board members. I feel like you just spun me around in a big fat circle.
I can totally understand that, Annie, because we took a position against that ballot initiative, and then now we're saying let's put it in the merger plan. Go ahead.
But I understand you. You just, I don't mean to stop you from talking, but I heard you say just now, your explanation is that, and I just want to say it my way, so I'm sure I heard you correctly. And I want to say my point after that. So I'm understanding you to say that the strong vote for 3-3, regardless of what anybody thinks happens, it's a vote is a vote is a vote. You feel if we put something different in the merger plan, we're going to have a confused community trying to vote on something that doesn't include the very thing that they strongly already voted for. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to put out there that I feel like a merry-go-round, but I understand. I appreciate.
And Signorello.
Now exiting.
I wonder, in my mind, I've been wondering this and I haven't said it out loud. So I'm going to say it out loud now. My feeling is that it will not matter what we already voted on, because the new thing that the merger is going to bring about is a brand new entity. And that brand new entity might not have
again
that play catch up from before.
Is now joining.
I'm almost convinced in my mind that anything that got voted on before the merger, if there's a merger, that's a new community, even though it's still the town. It's a new community. It could even have a board that's called not the select board. It could be called anything. And I'm not convinced that the vote of what happened, which is my biggest concern, that the vote that already happened about the 3-3 has anything to do with what the new community is going to be after that. I'm not convinced. And I don't know the laws about it, but I'm not convinced intellectually. So that's a very large concern of mine, that was why I didn't think it was a good idea, that there's this thing that got voted on. And so there's that about the current way the select board is. And then there's this merger vote. And then this forms a brand new situation. Even though it's all the same involved people, it's new and different. And I don't know that this can play catch up to that.
I think, in my personal opinion, only speaking for myself, the fact that we had the 3-3 vote, if we went into the merger plan and did not include it, then the majority of people who voted in favor of 3-3 would be unhappy if it weren't included in the merger plan, and they therefore would not vote yes on the merger plan.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we should propose something other than 3-3. I'm just saying that we should not put anything in because it's a separate proposal.
We may not be allowed to leave that out, Andy. I guess that's a question for Dan Richardson.
Well, it comes back to the whole, I've been told over and over again that we are dissolving both charters and starting a new one. We never made that decision. There was no vote on that. This has just been a path that's been taken. And what I'm saying is, given the history that we've had since then, the fact that we've had a vote that has a very definitive answer to it, why are we bringing it in again and voting on it a second time? That itself may be a problem, that we're voting on a representation model a second time, the same representation model.
I think the consensus, we may not have had a formal vote on it, Andy, but a consensus at the outset of the discussions of merger was that
consensus doesn't count. You have to have a vote in order to have it be a position.
Andy, we all entered we entered the conversation about merger in good faith that we would be dealing with two separate charters because we wanted to avoid the sense that the town would be completely absorbing the village and making it disappear by having the village dissolve their charter and the town keep its charter. it does have an implication of some kind of takeover, and we really wanted to avoid that sensation. And so it may not have been a formal vote, and I understand how you feel about consensus, but that was how we achieved the ability for both boards to move forward in good faith, was to come to some sort of consensus that we would have we would be dissolving 2 charters and creating a new single charter.
Can I intervene?
Certainly.
Okay. I don't want to risk going offline and going to check minutes, but I actually think we did have a formal vote.
No, we did not.
Yes,
I've checked off minutes. No.
We voted to proceed with the government operations committee to create a charter for a new community. We voted to empower the government subcommittee to do that piece of work. And we authorized the governance subcommittee to, conduct a survey and to consult with Dan Richardson with the very clear stated goal of creating a unified charter. And I think that was approved by both boards, Andy. I could go back and check.
Not all the language that you said was included in that. And the work product of the subcommittee was supposed to come back for review and discussion. And I'm just trying to have that discussion. I think that representation and merger are separate topics and should be dealt with separately. And I don't think we should vote a second time on the representation model. That's my, that's just me. You don't
Okay, Andy, thank you for making that very clear. So Andy has a comment, and then I think we need to hand it over to the trustees so they can share their thoughts.
That was my comment.
Oh, okay. So we've had our say. Trustees, please tell us what you think.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you as well for George introducing this. So I would open this up. George, if you don't mind, since you've spoken a little bit, I'll turn it over to the other trustees first. So why don't we start off with Raj?
Well, I expressed at the last governance subcommittee meeting that I'm comfortable, including the 3-3 model in the merger proposal with the addition of a process to look at representation more permanently. So this may or may not go into effect 3-3 prior to our vote on merger. It's looking more likely that the legislature will get both things at the same time. So if they match, I think both the voters who voted for it and the legislature would probably be more inclined to look on it positively. So I don't think it's a good model. I don't think, as was said earlier, both communities voted for it. I realize it's a townwide vote, but it was a townwide vote to district and separate, in a sense, the town, in my mind, and the village, as one of those entities, didn't support it. So I'm comfortable including it in the merger document if there's a process for a committee to look at what I would consider a more permanent representative model, which honestly, based on the feedback we've gotten over the past 18 months, the community might want something a little more nuanced and than a simple 3-3. I'm also, to be quite honest, a little nervous how a 3-3 would work in a difficult transition period. I mean, as George alluded to earlier, this is a 5-year period potentially when the communities have a lot of difficult decisions to make. And this is just a recipe, perhaps intentional, for gridlock. So that does concern me as well. I will support it in the merger doc, as I said, because I think people, a majority of the folks in the town outside the village, made it clear that this is something they wanted.
Thank you, Raj. Dan, if you'd like to go next.
Sorry, I just had to unmute my mic. No, I agree with what Raj just said. I also believe that at the vote, a lot of people, I've spoke with people here in the village, not so many people from outside of the village within the town, but the people I've spoken to here had some confusion as to what they were voting on. I know you would express that at one point, Andrew, that there was probably some confusion and people maybe thought they were voting for a merger on the 3-3 vote that was connected to the merger. So I think it's important that we include this in the package that's sent to the government ops, so that, like Elaine said as well, that if the people don't see that there, I think that would cause problems.
Thank you, Dan. Amber, if you would like to go next.
So I agree with everything that everybody else has already said, but I guess the only thing I'd add is that I'm concerned that if we do, to Patrick's point, if we submit this with a 3-3, I don't know how much the legislature is going to want to make changes to what we're proposing. So I don't know that any discussion has really happened with them regarding that piece of it.
If I can jump in.
Amber.
May I jump in with that,
Go ahead,
Andrew?
Elaine.
My understanding is that the legislature may or may not provide guidance as to how to implement. They may say, okay, you can do 3-3, and this is what you should do in order to address a tie, and this is what you should do to appoint a chair. They may give some guidance. Most likely, they will say, okay, 3-3 is fine, you figure it out. And then we will have to sit down and hammer out how that works. Or the select board would have to sit down and hammer out how it works and answer all those questions about tie breaking and appointing a chair and quorum and all that kind of thing.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine. George, was there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, very simple. You can't send a new municipal charter to the legislature that does not have language that addresses your representation. It's like saying you're not going to have, we're going to send a municipal charter that for a council manager form of government, but we're not going to discuss anything that the manager does. It's absolutely required if we're going to send if we're going to put a charter in front of the voters in November to vote on, you absolutely have to have a representation model in there. It's not a choice. You have to have that in there. And so so that's not a choice of leaving all the language about representation out of a charter. That's just simply not possible. Number one. Number two, when we talked about this in the subcommittee, we were all four of us were, I've got to say, equivocal about it. I think that we saw the strengths and weaknesses of everything. We saw the sort of the ambivalence from the KSV survey about a lot of people seem to, probably slightly more people wanted all at large versus some kind of a ward or district model. And we all kind of said the only concern we had was locking in forever and ever a village versus town modality into the new community. That was our big concern. I would say early on when we looked at representation models, we looked at 3-3, and we actually specifically asked Dan Richardson about it, and it was something we discussed. So I don't think it's just totally alien to anything that we've looked at or talked about in the past. I don't think it's a huge step for us to put a 3-3 model in the proposed new charter. That's my point. Thanks.
Thank you, George. I know personally I would echo what has already been said, especially Max, your earlier comments about how the vote has happened. Let us put this in and move forward that way. I think that is for many of the reasons that have already been said. So I wouldn't add anything else with the exception of to add a little bit to George's portion about how my understanding of state law is that if a municipality does not change anything within their charter or create a charter, then it defaults to state rules or state statutes, which have a select board defined as a 3-member board, which is why smaller communities such as Westford, for instance, will have a 3-member board, is that their charter doesn't specify otherwise. So if we are creating a new charter for this new community, then if we don't specify what that representation model is, then it would default to a 3-member board, which would, I believe, cause a significant ripple effect among the community, thinking they're going to get 6 members or however many members they think they're going to get, and then all of a sudden they only have 3. So that's all I would say to that. And Elaine, I'll turn it back over.
I just have one other observation to make regarding the final paragraph in the memo, George, about appointment of a ward commission.
Yes.
Which I think I agree, this should be a shall, not a could.
Right.
That, it has to be specific and it has to be time constrained. I would rather see, instead of within 5 years, I would rather see that the new select board must, within 1 to 2 years, implement a ward commission. And then only because we know how long this conversation takes. And it's taken us a long time, and we have a lot of other things to deal with. A ward commission would only be dealing with representation, which I understand, but it's a long process. It requires professional assistance. But I would also want to, I really am not fond of the possibility of, if the board does not implement a ward commission, then it just reverts to at-large. I really would like to require the board to have the ward commission and then abide by the findings of the ward commission. And if the ward commission determines that at-large is the best solution, then that is what happens. But I feel like the ward commission should do that research. And if they decide that 3 and 3 is the way to go, then we stick with it. But if they decide that 2, 2, and 3 is the way to go, it's the ward's recommendation that the select board has to deal with, not reverting back to an at-large model.
Do you want me to respond, Elaine?
That's just my preference. It can lay on the table and not be picked up. I just really feel like I don't want it to just default to the thing that the residents just voted against. Not that I agree with what, I personally, everybody knows I don't agree with the 3-3 model, but it is what the voters wanted. And I'd want to be more specific that the ward commission is going to continue to do deeper research so that we have the math behind the proposal of whatever districts we're going to be dealing with. Right. I just don't like the idea of having it revert to at-large. I would rather have the research be done, and whatever research yields is what we follow.
Yeah, I just think, again, I think the language that's in here is language that Ann and I dug up, and we tried to look at other charters. I want to emphasize that strongly. We're not, just winging it here. I think that the problem is that to say you're going to appoint a committee and then you're going to do what that committee tells you to do might be a problematic thing to put in a charter.
No, my apologies. The committee would make a recommendation and the voters would make a decision.
Exactly. So you have to just sort of let some of these things slide. I think we all agree with what you're saying, the sentiment of what you're saying, but I don't think we can, just to reiterate it, you have to be very straightforward. You say the select board shall appoint a commission to do this work and to look at it. And the reason the concern, keep the other thing in mind here, with the 3-3 vote that was just taken, there's no mechanism that went along with it that says, how is the town of Essex, let's say merger fails and we just revise the town charter to be 3-3, and 10 years from now you have 15,000 people in one part of the town and 10,000 in another. There's no mechanism in the charter to revise your representation scheme. So you could have two very, very different populations, each represented by having the same number of representatives. The charter change petition didn't have anything. It didn't have that language in there. So there's no revision right now afoot for the town charter to revise what you're going to do.
No,
I think that's a great big flaw. I think that's another reason why the legislature is not going to like this thing, or they're going to say.
I think we're overthinking here. What I'm just trying to say is that in the new charter, whatever governing body is the makeup of the new select board, whatever
Right.
that is, that select board is going to charge a ward commission to research and recommend the appropriate representation model for the town.
Mm-hmm.
And they may come back and say, after all the research, the way it is right now is the way it should be.
Sure.
Or they
Yep.
may come back and say, we really think it should be at large. This is our recommendation. Burlington's ward commission came back with 3 models because they couldn't make any recommendations. They couldn't prioritize their recommendations, and the council chose. So all I'm saying is we need to just make sure we have the commission do the research that they need to do and bring their recommendations back to the board, but not have the reverting back to at large. If after 5 years the select board does not do the commission and the commission does do their work, we're not just going to revert to at large. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Have the commission do the work, but don't just drop it and go back to at large. Require the commission to be done and then follow the protocol of taking the recommendations and making decisions.
This is Raj. I would agree with the time frame. I like the idea of getting it going right away. I'm just going to lay that there. Sorry.
I totally agree, but look at what we're going through right now, okay, with coronavirus. So you can't anticipate what's going to happen. So we're saying within 5 years, you're cutting them some slack. You can say, we really want you to get this done within a year or 6 months or whatever. But on the other hand, when this all gets, if and when this all gets approved, just as it's becoming enacted and empowered, you could have COVID-20, okay? And then suddenly that board has a lot of other things on its mind, but now you've got a charter provision that says, oh no, this is real important, you gotta get this commission done in a year and a half. So there's nothing, if you're saying 5 years, there's nothing stopping them from doing it within a year and a half. Do you see what I'm saying?
There's flexibility in the timing.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe
I understand the flexibility in the timing. The sticking point for me is the automatic reversion to at large.
May I please?
Okay.
I guess
I've found that raising my hand doesn't help in this situation.
No,
Andy, no, I didn't know. Sorry.
Just to one of the things that Dan Richardson cautioned us against pretty strongly was requiring a future select board to do anything.
That's right.
And so I think, Elaine, what you're asking for is to put a requirement upon a future select board. And Dan was saying you really can't do that.
But the legislature won't approve a merger document that has suggestions rather than requirements. So we do want to make sure that the new select board investigates wards.
The thing that they don't want is contingencies, right? Is if this happens, then this. So it's not, this isn't a contingency. This is a, maybe it's a recommendation, but it's not a requirement. Dan was pretty strongly said you can't put a requirement.
I'm just expressing my concern about the at-large part, or the at-large part. The wording that's in the document is absolutely fine with me. I just want us to not automatically revert back to at-large if the select board chooses not to follow this recommendation that they have a ward commission. Because to me, that's the equivalent of kicking the can down the road and then, oops, 5 years are gone. We don't have to do it anymore. We're going to go back to at-large.
Yeah, I agree that it shouldn't go back to at-large. And that's why I'm suggesting we take all of this out. But that's just me.
Andy, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, we can. We can.
I'm in.
Oh, Raj, sorry.
It's okay. No, don't apologize. This is all difficult to get through with this method. I just wanted to clarify for George. I didn't mean it should be completed. And I don't know that I didn't understand Elaine to mean that it should be completed in a year and a half or a year.
No,
I would just like it to started so that it's not kicked down the road until year 3 or 4. That's all. I'm just, and it may be a detail
Raj, I think you muted yourself.
Yeah, you muted yourself.
That's probably for the best. I just meant that I like the idea of getting it started. I don't have if it starts after the first year, the board's seated, they got a lot to do. If there's a way to recommend strongly, that they get going with it. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I don't want to keep going on, but we've got nothing else in the charter. I understand what you're saying. You don't want to see it revert back to all at large, but there's no provision or language in this charter anywhere that says, how are you going to readjust village-town boundaries 10 years out, 20 years out, in order to adjust for population changes? We don't have that language in there. And so at what point, it doesn't have to be within 5 years, you could say within 10 years it reverts to all at large, but at you either, in my understanding, you either have to have that and say it goes back to all at large, or you have to have some specific language that says how you're going to readjust village-town voting wards to accommodate changes in population. And since
I think you just said it there, George. I mean,
but since we're not putting that latter specific language in, we're assuming that that work will get done by the commission, and that the newly elected board will take their recommendation and will make the appropriate charter change. That's all that's the underlying logic of all this.
It sounds like absent an actual ward commission, you can't have wards, because what you're saying is you're automatically assuming that if a ward commission exists, then that population adjustment will be attended to. But if there isn't a ward commission, it won't.
Right.
So, may I please?
Annie.
Yes. Is it possible? And I would love to be able to see, Andy, if you want to switch your video on, I'm curious about your reaction, but that's okay if you don't want to.
What?
I'm curious about if we can put in the language of not X amount of years, not the contingencies, and maybe I'm just repeating what y'all just said, put in the language of must form ward commission. Is that a contingency? Yes.
I mean, that's what's in there now.
Right. But I agree that I feel like that 5-year thing is this wafty thing that's going to just, and I don't want to put a contingency either. I guess that's not appropriate, but I like a 1 year. When Elaine said 1 year, I'm like, yeah, I'm down for that, because I feel like it's going to not matter anymore, and everyone's going to forget that it did. And I think it's got so much value that it will be a fight to get it back the other way. Again, notwithstanding the fact that we are in the middle of a literal pandemic. So I don't mean to confuse those two issues. If this was, a year ago and we're talking, I would still say that 5-year thing just makes me feel like it's, a little weakly phrased. And I would like to see a 1 year rock solid time limit to at least, I know I see George, but this is why I want Andy to turn this thing on. I just like to see something tighter, so that I feel like it's something that is structured and will provide a systematic decision, to know that that's what a step is to take.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments about that? And then maybe we can move on to taxation.
This is Max. I think if there's language in there that says within the first year, this commission will be formed to study that. And I think we need to have that 5-year revert to all at large, kind of as that hammer. Get started within that first year, and it's expected to be done before that 5 years. And if it's not, then things are kind of dysfunctional, and get it to go to all at large. That's been the way it's been for decades, right? Over however many hundred something years. So, that's not even a risky position to go to as the default if that commission doesn't come up with something. So I'm okay making that language say do it within the first year, or form it within the first year, but have that hammer left out there that says if you're dysfunctional, well, it's going to revert to all at large.
I also, can I speak?
Yes.
I also think that, Elaine, I don't know if you were muted. I also think that that having a tighter time understanding within that description will help the people who are maybe not keen on the 3-3 feel as though there's hope for this other thing that they're talking about, which is districts. And I think that will also help people feel more comfortable with merger, the same way that we're trying to make sure that we are comfortable towards the people who like the 3-3. So I think there's a clear understanding out in all areas of the town, which of course includes the village, that are strongly versed in several ways. And if we can deliver a package that helps everybody feel as though their idea is being looked at, it will be a cleaner line. I'm talking too much.
No, it's fine, Annie. And does anyone else have any comments on this? And we'll move on to taxation. I think it's, it's a hammer for some, and it's an opportunity to kick the can down the road for others. So the middle ground is what's already in the document. So my apologies for drawing out the conversation longer than it needed to. All right. Trustees, would you like to begin the conversation on tax rate integration models?
Sure, thank you. And so I'm assuming by this point in time or I hope by this point in time, all the trustees, or all of us have read through each of these 4 scenarios. They've been presented to us a couple of different times now. So if the boards are okay, I'd like us to not go through each of them at this point to describe them any further unless someone feels otherwise.
I have comments.
Right. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have comments on them. I'm simply saying that instead of going through each one, describing each one, I feel like it's something we've done a couple of times. So what I would say for each of these personally is at this point in time, we have some rough financial numbers of what the impacts of these would be. But we don't, as I understand it, have the hard data on what each of these 4 proposals would mean for a tax implication for either the town outside the village or the village residents. So without it, I have a hard time giving my 100% backing for each of these or for any individual one. I feel like the best I can do is give a philosophical yes. I feel that I could support something like this, but again, it's going to be based upon without seeing the full facts. I have a hard time giving that full-fledged support. With that said, I'm okay with the sidewalk district. That I can support. I'm okay with the debt assessment district. That one I can support. The one that I'm having a hard time with is the downtown improvement district. I'm having a hard time putting a specific tax on our businesses only within the downtown to charge them for to help pay for infrastructure improvements.
Right.
I'm having a hard time with that. Similarly, I'm having a hard time with that capital improvement district. One of the things that I don't understand in either of those is if the intents are to reduce the tax increase for town outside the village residents, I don't see how either of those two does that. So I would say those are the end of really my questions.
Okay.
Instead of going through and necessarily addressing them, George, if you're okay with it, we want to just go through the rest of the trustees and have them.
Please.
Great. Amber, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess I agree with what you said, Andrew, about, without having the numbers and stuff, I can't really affirmatively say I'm on board with all of them. I'm still struggling overall with the concept because, like, just using the sidewalk district as an example, I get where we're trying to get and where we're trying to go, but at the same time, I feel like we're still pulling back and saying we're still it's the us versus them kind of deal. And, they use our sidewalks. The town uses our sidewalks. And so I'm still struggling with the whole concept, but I mean, I'm happy to vote with the group.
Thank you, Amber. Let's go on to Raj.
Well, I've been on a lot of these discussions around these. I think, to clarify, this is probably too much, but I think the idea here was to minimize the impact and the transfer of.
Did we lose you, Raj?
We lost him.
Hello, Raj. All right.
You there?
While we wait for Raj. Oh, there's Raj back.
Okay, sorry. I think the point was to basically minimize how much of the village budget was put over into the overall town budget for a period of time, minimizing the impact on town outside the village voters if merger were to pass. These were all, I think, efforts to hold some of those expenses back since they were fairly village centric. I think, interestingly, with the sidewalk district as an example, from the first public meeting we had at the Essex Elementary School or middle school, people seemed interested in enlarging the sidewalk district to include portions of the town outside the village, especially the ring around the village. I think I would like to see numbers on the 4 scenarios, and I would just to see what kind of impact they would have, both to see what we could do as a village with these programs and also to see what the mitigation effort would mean for town outside the village voters. I know it's a lot of work for staff to go through all this, but I think they all, I guess the one I'm least in favor of, I suppose, would be the downtown improvement district for businesses. But again, I'd want to see what the impacts of these would be before saying no to any of them.
Thank you, Raj. Dan, if you're ready.
There, just had to unmute. No, I agree. I agree with you, Andrew. The tax implications on businesses in the village center, when the benefit of that district is being felt in the town outside the village. Once we become one community, merger goes through, anything we do, increasing the grand list, improving the infrastructure, those people outside are utilizing it. Just as Amber said, people in the town utilize our sidewalks. They come, we're not merged right now. They come to 4th of July, all the events we do. I have no problem with people benefiting from it, but to put the burden disproportionately upon village residents, village businesses, I don't think is fair. As far as the transition period for the tax implications, I've spoken with some people in my area here, in the neighborhood, in the village, and that don't feel it should take as long as we're proposing 12 years or such. People that have lived here for a while say, well, why do I have to wait 12 years? I've been paying extra, 42% of the total tax for the town, as well as my own, property tax within the village, and I think it should be a quicker process. These are some people that are getting up in age too, saying, I may not be around to see the benefit from this, That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dan. And last but certainly not least, George.
Okay, well, let me go back and do each one. In terms of the sidewalk district, there were two components to it. First of all, yes, it's to reduce the amount you're transferring to the general fund, the town general fund, on the one hand. But also keep in mind, the village has a different sidewalk plowing policy than the town. And when the two policies and the two governments come together, maybe the village will be able to maintain, you'll somehow figure out a way to maintain the current sidewalk policy that exists in the village, but maybe you'll be compelled, or the new board will be compelled, or feel that no, they want to be more like the town, and we plow the sidewalks when we get to them, and not as aggressively as the village has traditionally done. So that's a concern, because we have for the last 20 years tried to develop this part of the town or the village to be a very walkable, pedestrian-friendly community. I'm not trying to raise fears, but you could potentially see that go away if you aren't, for half the year anyway, when you aren't plowing the sidewalks. You're getting to them every couple of days or every day or whenever you can get to them after all the streets are done. So that policy could change. So it had two components. It was trying to reduce the tax impact for the town outside the village. On the other hand, it was trying to ensure that one kind of essential but not well publicized village policy stays in force. So that's the logic there. In terms of the downtown improvement district, village businesses in the downtown are already paying a penny on the tax rate. They've been paying it now for the last 3 years. And the idea is that they would just continue paying it. It wouldn't be a new tax. It would just be a continuation of an existing tax. Other properties around the village would see it go away, but it would do, again, two things. It would reduce, not by much, but by a small amount, the tax transfer to the town general fund on the one hand, but on the other hand, it would give us a little bit of money, the new board, a little bit of extra money to spend on the kinds of things that we've been spending money on in the village center, and that are part of the village capital plan and in the capital improvement plan. I mean the municipal plan. Things like sidewalk improvements, hardscape improvements, a little bit of landscaping. Again, in a new community, is the new government, when it's looking at the entire community and no longer just looking at the village and improving the village, are they going to want to spend the money? And so this would give them a little bit of money that's just specifically designated for those kinds of improvements in the village center, which I think are very much needed. In terms of
can I ask a quick clarification?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with that downtown improvement district, are you talking about the penny on the tax rate that exists now?
Exactly.
And instead of having it be for all of the village residents or all village properties, it's only on the commercial properties?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. And in terms of capital, the idea is to pick out, it would really be to try to pick out some capital projects that would remain, that would be pretty village specific, probably some sidewalk rebuilds and so forth that would stay with the village, that the village would specifically pay off during a 12-year period. And then when you finally do merge what's left of the village capital improvement list with the town capital improvement list, there's not a lot there. You've really paid it down. So the transfer of the village capital into the town capital wouldn't be a gigantic hit, would be a smaller hit. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Do you understand what I'm saying, Andrew? Or I'm not sure if anyone else is getting me. Again, I'm not wedded to any of these, but we're looking for ways to make this as least impactful as it can be, and trying to get that average, the transfer for the average town outside the village homeowner to be as low as possible. At the same time, do things that kind of help the village continue some of its ongoing policies and so forth. So that's why I have to admit that I was the author. I kind of was really the principal author of some of these things, although I stole the downtown improvement from a couple of other communities that have done this. This is something that Rutland and I think St. Johnsbury and one or two other places have done. And in terms of the 12-year phase-in, again, that just offers the minimum phase-in, the minimum impact for the town outside the village. That length of time, and I want to add that the 12-year time period and all of these tax districting ideas have already been looked at and been given kind of a preliminary thumbs up by someone on the GovOps committee and the Legislative Council. So no one saw any big technical flaws with them. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Seems like the trustees are all set. Elaine, I'll turn it over to you.
Select Board, what are your thoughts on the taxation districts?
Elaine, can I go? This is
of course.
Matt? Okay. I think they're important to for the village to protect what they value in those areas. And I think it's important to try to lessen the immediate tax increase burden to the folks outside the village. So to me, this is a win-win situation. Regardless, I've heard some people say they need to see the numbers first. I don't personally think that's important from my perspective, because you know that it's going to move it in that direction that these were brought out and intended to do for those outside the village, but also protect what the village residents value. And that time frame of the 12 years is, was decided based on that on paying off the village debt over that time. So that's why we matched up that that transition time so that we didn't have all these multiple transition times. We just have the two, the representation in this one. So I think it's important to be able to lessen that impact to the folks outside the village, because it's a big number that this merger is going to create for them, and doing it slowly over time makes it more manageable. And in the meantime, the village folks, I think, would be comfortable knowing that the particular areas that they really value are going to stay that way during this transition time until things get worked out well over time. So those are my 2 cents.
Thanks, Max. Pat, how do you feel?
Actually, Max, I think, summed it up pretty well. Speaking for me as a village resident, these are things that are important to me. The sidewalks, are absolutely something that I value, about the closeness of the community that I'm in. And I do think that having that district in place is something that, for those who live outside the village, there has been a lot of talk, or at least some interest in, expanding it at some point, which I think, having it in existence already may be a good option for us to utilize further down the road. And any sort of, tax structure that is going to lessen the amount of payments that we can place onto those residents who live outside the village currently is a good thing in my book. So I see all of these as win-wins from what I can look at.
Thanks, Pat. Annie Cooper, what do you think?
I stand very strongly that people cannot know what they're voting on about merger until they see what complete separation looks like. I am absolutely not speaking about choosing to separate. I am not speaking about a separation in literal terms. I'm saying that without the numbers to show exactly why it is how it is and exactly how it will be, that it is not clear to people what currently goes on. People don't understand. And I don't think it's appropriate that people don't understand it. And I want a complete separation numbers game to be shown in order for people to understand how to vote for merger, because I think it needs to be more factual in that regard. And people really need to see what is currently happening in order to know how to grow forward.
So Annie, we've heard a number of requests over the last many months for exactly the thing you're asking for. And I think the reason we haven't seen those numbers is because we cannot come to complete factual answers on that, because there are dozens of assumptions and implications that have to be just made in order to give some numbers to that question. And they can all be changed in different ways and change the dollars at the end. So I don't know that we will ever be able to get to a spreadsheet that says this is what it's going to cost if to the town and the village if separation occurred. I don't know that we'll ever be able to answer that question.
I feel strongly that we absolutely can. I know we absolutely can, because it's a simple procedure of show what we know, say this is unknown, known, unknown, done. And then just leave people to know what's unknown. And that
the problem is the unknown is probably a good 40 to 50% of the equation.
But at least we've now, sorry to yell, I'm sorry. At least we've now shown it. Known, unknown, done, here, look. Sorry to be so aggressive. I'm sitting too close to my computer.
Annie, what about the tax districts?
I would like to assess that once I see this thing that I'm asking for. So I would like to hold off my opinion on that for the moment.
Okay. Andy Watts, what do you think?
Looking at the debt assessment district, we know the exact date when the last village debt payment is going to be made, and I think it might be more appropriate to have that in there rather than a 12-year period, because depending on how long it takes to get approved, it may go beyond the actual payoff date. So that's a suggestion I'd like to make. For the sidewalk district, I also remember, as Raj said, that folks outside of the village are interested in, being able to join that if they can. I would like to see it be considered to be made permanent and expandable. And I understand it's a big capital and big resource implications if it does get expanded. But I'm not convinced that that it should be a temporary thing. And then on the capital improvement district, I remember a discussion with Dan Richardson where he was concerned about 12 years, given that the list is kind of wishy-washy out to 12 years. We have, there is a 5-year capital plan, and it was my impression from Dan that he thought that the 5-year transition plan for the capital improvement district would be more appropriate than 12, because we already have a specific plan, and it's not as ambiguous as 12 years would be. Oh, yes, and then the other comment I wanted to make, maybe I should have led with this, I don't know. 3 weeks ago, I spent 12 hours standing at the polls talking to folks outside the village coming to vote. And I've said this before in select board meetings that there was a very strong message that folks outside the village would like to see the town or the village give something up as part of the merger, rather than a wholesale everything move over kind of situation. So that's relaying the message that's information that I got talking to lots and lots of people on election day.
Yes, to my point, exactly what Andy is saying, that there is not enough information in the hands of our community to recognize and understand why things need to shift the way they do. People simply don't understand what is happening, and they need more facts. So for the numbers I asked for before.
Yeah, so folks have said that they recognize that these 4 or 5 proposals here are an attempt to slow down the rate at which the taxes transfer from one area to another, but ultimately it doesn't change the final number. And so they understand that there's an attempt here, but it's not seen as enough. Is the message that I've gotten. So,
Pat, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess, Andy, if I have a question, is what is it that you heard that they believe the village residents should be giving up? I guess I would like to hear the answer to that, because I'm not really sure of, anything that's extraordinary or I've heard the term, luxury items and I've never actually seen any of those that the village actually has. Rather, I think that there are misconceptions that people have, but I'd be really curious to know if there's actually identifiable items that individuals who live in the town outside the village can point at and say, hey, you guys need to lose this, because I think that, the counter argument might be for village residents, hey, town outside the village, you created the extra fire department after we did. Why aren't you giving that up to help lower the numbers everywhere across the town? There's a lot of back and forth. So I'm wondering if, in what you heard, if there were any specific examples.
Yep, I can give those. One was George had already brought up, was your sidewalk plowing and its priority. The other is the Child Care Division of Parks and Rec. Could be spun off as a nonprofit, just taken right off the books. Take that, So that's the other one that's was proposed by a number of people.
Could I address that for a second?
Although it's none of my business what the village does with their services, but those are I was asked, and those are the things that just people brought up.
Raj, I think Raj wanted to speak, and then Annie.
Yeah, I mean we still don't have busing to service all of our students. I just want to make clear for the folks at home, not for you, Andy, just for the folks at home that are listening in, because I've already got a few emails sitting here. So, we do what we do largely because we have people that need to use those sidewalks at an early time of day, mostly children and young people who go to school. And I do believe that the childcare is a self-funding operation off the books. So it's not a luxury item that the taxpayers are paying separately for. It's paid by user fees in an enterprise fund. Could everyone mute their mics if they're not?
What's happening?
So just for the folks at home to understand that we understand that there's a perception out there that the village has some luxury items that they pay for. I think that it will take some work by both boards to make clear how things actually work and how they're funded. Recreation, for one, is largely funded by only the people that use the services. Can never make that point often enough. Sorry. Thank you.
Raj, thank you for pointing that out. And I know that we had another merger outreach program planned for March 28th, which has been canceled. This was going to be the very topic, is a side-by-side look at village and town budgets and an explanation about what enterprise funds are and why the village rec department is not on the books for the programming that is paid for by its own users. And the same is true for the town. It's just on a lesser scale. So do any of the other select board members have any comments or questions? I just have a few notes to say about the districts. Annie.
Please forgive me, but the fourth meeting.
Annie, is there something?
Sarah's making a lot of noise.
Sarah, can you mute your mic, please?
I can. I would like to weigh in on this.
Yeah, we really would like to hear from you. Was that Annie or Sarah wanting to speak?
I have the floor.
Okay, Annie, go ahead.
Sorry, Sarah, not to be rude to you. Elaine, it is a very common occurrence for me that you tell me I'm going to be next, and then you completely forget about me. And I don't ever say anything, but I'm saying it now. I'm sorry to sound so aggressive. Thank you.
My apologies, Annie. The technology is a little challenging, so thank you for your patience.
It happens to me in actual meetings, which is why I'm bringing it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you for correcting me, Annie.
Thank you. Andy, I would very much like you to please repeat what you said, because I am absolutely concerned about the statement that you just made about childcare, and I'm confused by it. So I need you to please restate what you said so that I can understand and feel that you have not made a disrespectful remark about how that childcare functions.
So no, I was asked for examples of things that people think outside the village think that could be sacrificed or offered up as a incentive or just something to maybe I'll start over here. As I said, folks recognize that that we're trying to soften the blow by delaying when the taxes come. Okay, and so what I heard a lot from a lot of people, and please be careful that I'm translating things that people have told me. I'm not necessarily taking a position here. But people have told me that they're not going to vote for merger unless they see the village give something up. And so I was asked by Raj, what types of things have people said could be given up? And the two things that came to mind were sidewalk plowing, and the other that people talked to me about. And the other one was the child care division. Those are the two things that came up. I'm not saying that they should be done. And I'm not saying that they're services that aren't needed.
I just want to, because I wasn't part of that discussion, I just want to say that I completely understand that, Andy. There are examples that were given to you.
Yeah.
Okay, Annie?
Well, I'll table what I understood from before. I'll leave it be. And I apologize for my aggression. I got really, really frustrated with what I'd heard. And Elaine, I'm sorry that the brunt of my frustration ended up in that statement I made to you. And I'm very, very sorry to have been so rude to you publicly on this camera situation. I'm sorry. But I was very, very frustrated with what I heard as a kind of disrespectful tonality towards a very important function in our society, especially right now during this pandemic. And I'm sorry that I got so heated about that. Thank you for the conversation.
I think what this whole situation points out is that there's a great deal of misinformation in the town and the village about services on both sides. Yes. Having been a trustee and a select board member, I can say that there is no meat on any of the bones that can be picked off. We can continue to look at those things, but the idea of sacrificing, while I understand it completely, is not a good basis for which to negotiate in good faith. And so I think we're going to continue moving on to do the best we can to mitigate the increase for the town outside the village, while doing the best we can to preserve the quality of services that both communities have, understanding that they're different. And yes, something might have to give on both sides. So just we need to keep that in mind as we proceed. And now Sarah has been very patiently waiting to unmute her mic and help us better understand what we're talking about.
Thanks, Elaine. So I just have one point that I'd like to clarify/reiterate. Raj is 100% correct. The child care component of EJRP is completely in the EJRP Enterprise Fund. We've been throwing around the term off the books, which has some, awkward and negative connotations. And I understand that what we mean by that is not in the general fund, as in not supported by tax dollars. It is very much on the books. It is part of the village budget day. It's part of the village budget process. It's just that the trustees approve it and not the voters. So 100% of the EJRP childcare function is supported by user fees. None of that is paid for by tax dollars. Therefore, none of that will be transitioned into the larger tax base as part of a merger plan. The other thing I would like to say is I really appreciate all of your comments and all of your questions from everybody. I'm taking some notes, and as things settle out over the next month with my son's schedule and all this unexpected craziness, I intend to layer them into many Excel workbooks and have some answers. And so I just want to acknowledge the fact that I've been quiet during this conversation. I've not been jumping in to answer questions on the fly. This is really just a really challenging time for me as a divorced parent of a small child. So I'm taking notes. I appreciate everything you guys are sharing, and it will help me as we go forward. So that's it. I'm going to mute myself again. Please continue.
Sarah, thank you for that. You are definitely struggling, like a lot of our families are, with this bizarre situation. So we truly appreciate how you're trying to juggle parenting with your work. So thank you for that, and for being on this meeting that's going late on your time at home. Can I ask you a specific question about the capital improvement district, or actually more the sidewalk district? We're talking about 12-year periods here. Can you give us a description of what will happen at the end of the 12-year period with the sidewalk district and why we may or may not want to consider making it permanent?
I'll do my best. So the sidewalk district in and of itself is approximately $125,000 per year for each of those 12 years. And at the end of that, it would sunset, and that amount would be distributed in a 13th year after it sunsets into the entire community. We came to $125,000 because the Village Public Works Department has 2 full-time positions in the wintertime dedicated to sidewalk plowing. And so that's about $125,000 benefits all in. So it lowers the amount annually that's going to be transitioned to the entire community in the early years, but it would be all layered in like a 13th year. Now, I'm not sure, I can't tell you what the grand list is going to do over those 12 to 13 years, nor can I tell you what future boards are going to do with budgets. I don't know what sort of savings we may have through attrition, through new technologies. I just don't know. And if I did know, I would not be here. Having said that, the effect of having a 13th year almost balloon payment layered in may seem stark when we look at the numbers now, but I just don't know what the effect of that's going to be in the future. Elaine, have I answered your question? I think I might have digressed.
No, you exactly answered it. The only other last piece of it I was wondering about is whether a sidewalk district should be made permanent. And I don't know that that's a question for you or it's a question for the boards.
I do want to opine on, or I just want to say that right now, our grand list database is very nicely segregated between village properties and town outside the village properties. And right. If we try to move that line and make any models of a different area, that's going to cause some complications just behind the scenes running the numbers. If we are going to make it permanent and expandable, then we can certainly figure out how we're going to note that in the database. But as we're looking at things, if you guys want to look at a map and draw a line, it's going to be challenging, not impossible, but just challenging and time consuming, just so that you're aware, for me to come back and list and add all the grand list numbers up. So that's the only thing I'd say about that. Whether it's permanent or temporary, that's way above my pay grade.
George, I think at one point you had heard from Dan Richardson about permanence. Do you remember any of that information?
Permanence in terms of what, Elaine? I'm not
making
following.
The sidewalk district. What if we wanted to make the sidewalk district a permanent thing?
Yeah, that happens all the time. When you do things like this, you put a special district in, and then people decide, hey, this is working really well for some reason or another, and you make it permanent. Can I digress a little bit and get back I want to just maybe connect 2 conversations I just heard with Annie going back, and then also I want to see if I can triangulate here. Annie's point about wanting all the details of expenditures, and Andy's point about the village needing to give something up, and I think I have a solution here. I think early on when we started the governance subcommittee, I asked Lauren before she left to give me a breakdown, just so that we would know. It wasn't to make any kind of political points. It was just to give a breakdown of where does all the money come from and where does all the money go, okay, in the village and the town, according to village residential properties, town residential properties, village commercial properties, town commercial properties, global foundries, and then other non-tax revenues, okay? That sounds like, but that's where all the money comes. It has to come from one of those sources. And then where does it all come? And then where does it all go? And Lauren gave me that breakdown. That was for 2018. And why this gets to Andy's point is because I think if you saw where all the money is coming from already to fund town services like the Essex Free Library and the Town Recreation Department, I think a lot of folks in the town would say, oh, here's what the village is already giving up. They would see that the village is already giving a very, very significant amount of money to the town. So it might be one of those great moments where we all get onto the same page, where we all see exactly who is paying for what and where all that money goes. You see what exactly it is that the village spends its money on. We don't just buy water slides for our pools. We also, run a fire department and pave streets. So I think if we could do something like that, but with an updated version, it doesn't have to say, you don't need to say, here's what would happen in a separation, because you could let people draw their own conclusions what would happen in a separation. What would happen in a separation is that all of the village's residential taxes, its commercial taxes, and all of Global Foundries taxes, and about half of the other revenues would go in one direction, and the town would have town residential, town commercial, and then other non-tax revenues, but it would no longer have Global Foundries. People can draw their own conclusions when you see where all the money comes from and where it all goes. So I think that might get to the point of what Annie is suggesting or requesting, but without staff having to make any decisions about what would happen in a post-separation environment. You don't have to go there. You can just say, here's where all the money comes from. And I don't know if that's answered your question. Go ahead.
Georgia, you made a handy dandy graph of that information.
Yes.
That would you be interested in sharing it? I can share it with the group.
I'm hesitant to share it because Lauren it was first of all, it's $2,018. Mm-hmm. I also, if I try to get it right now and send it to you, I'm afraid
I have it. I can share it.
You can, yeah, you can, but I'm afraid I'll exceed my bandwidth and I'm going to knock myself offline, but that'll stop me from talking, so maybe you'll all
Before you show that, have you let Sarah review this? If not, then
I don't think we should just throw this up there. We don't know what we're looking at yet. I would hold this off and bring it to Sarah.
I'd let Sarah crawl through it.
It was a visualization of what George is talking about, and
right.
It's hard to follow, so I'm happy to not put it up. Is it already up?
Somebody's got it up. I would take it down because we don't
have
this yet.
Okay, got it.
Okay, let's just wait a second. We understand what we're
wait on it, and I would prefer to have Sarah look at it, and it'd be good, just to make sure, because Lauren warned me it was iffy, and then I had to take a lot of Lauren's decimals and convert them to percents and so forth. So, but yeah, I think it'd be informative. But I think we're kind of losing track of our conversation here.
Well, we can make that part of a conversation when we talk about our next outreach meeting, because we've been asked by the public, especially at our EMS meeting that we did in February, more visuals, please. Yep. We're explaining a lot and we're not showing at all. So it would be really good to continue providing visuals of that kind of conversation.
Can I make a statement?
Yes, of course, Dan.
Yes. To Annie's point, I just wanted to get back to what she said about getting the information out about the tax implications of merger as opposed to separation or status quo, what have you. I brought it up at a meeting, I think it was back in November maybe. We had a joint meeting, and as I recall at that meeting, Sarah Macy was using water and some buckets to kind of show what happens and how the taxes between the two communities come together. And, if you recall, that was Sarah doing that. And at that same meeting, I asked, do you have the data on the taxes or the tax implications of a separation as opposed to merger and, as opposed to status quo? And she said, yes, she did. And as I recall, Elaine, not to say you did anything wrong, you said, Dan, we're not going down that road. I agree. And I said at that meeting, I'm not suggesting that we go down that road of separation. I just want clarity for the people, because maybe we as a board know, but I think there's a lot of confusion in the community. They don't understand the tax implications of they don't understand what's going on. They say, oh, I pay a lot in taxes. I hear it from everywhere. I pay so much in taxes. They don't understand how the tax structure is. We really need to have that clarified. And if it's too wordy, I like graphs, like you're saying, people, if you keep it simple, stupid. Keep the KISS movement. Keep it simple, stupid, so that people can see it and it's quick to understand. You can't get into the minutia because you lose them. But we do have to get that out there somehow.
This is Sarah. Sorry, Dan, I just want to jump in really quickly here. I said I had done a very rough preliminary look at what that would take. So, I mean, I have more questions than we have time tonight to even begin discussing about how it would potentially play out. Questions that are frankly unanswerable at this point. So I just want to be very clear. Back in that meeting, I tried to iterate really strongly that it was a really rough basic look. So, and I have not done any more with that.
I totally agree with you. I'm not saying, that's where I'm saying we don't have to get down into the minutia, down to the exact dollars, just rough percentages. I'm not saying we have to be exact with figures. This isn't something that's going to have the accountants come in and check and to make sure, you don't have it exact. I just want the people to get the general gist of what's going on and how the municipalities are where the funds come from, where the revenue comes from. Like George said, that is being lost. People don't understand that. And it doesn't have to, it can be rough, but when we can ballpark it and then just say, here's the percentage roughly what is paid by, revenue from the village. And here is what, from the town outside the village. Here's what we do as a community together, roughly. I just want people to be educated and see it as simple as easy.
Annie?
I think let's first, and maybe not run it by Sarah, whatever we can do that doesn't overwork Sarah at this point and remembers that we have a pandemic. But also although I have to tell you from my heart, it's almost a little fun to be this worked up about something that's not that. So just for a second, but let's look at what, let's have, I hate to say Sarah after Sarah, you were so human too. I love you. Let's take a little look at whatever the right way to look at the thing in a slow time period, understanding allowances for all the madness at the thing that George is talking about, and see if we can pull from that a model of a concept that is factual and just clean and maybe very brief, maybe just a visual that is just clear without the larger thing that would be so stressful. I'm sorry for even I'm sorry that I was so aggressive about it. My head was not, my head was enjoying that little moment of non-pandemia. Elaine, you're muted.
Elaine, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I was aware of that. It just took me a moment to unmute myself. Appreciate the reminder. Just getting back to the tax districts, I just have one observation to make, and then I think we should move on because it's getting quite late and we have other things to talk about this document still. The downtown improvement district, I just want to share, I'm a little uncomfortable with shifting it to commercial properties only, simply because in the downtown, within the next 5 years, there's going to be like 500 apartment units there. It's going to be predominantly residential. And so to charge that tax to only the commercial properties and not the residential properties feels like a step backwards to me. And I'm not sure we've heard from any of our business community. I mean, I think I know what they're going to say. They're not going to like that, but out of all the tax districts that have been presented, I think the downtown improvement district is something that maybe we shouldn't be imposing. However, what we could conceivably do is consider discontinuing the village economic development penny and then reconfiguring it to be a town-wide penny for the purposes of economic development so that all businesses in the town can benefit from it, depending upon whether we're talking about the town center or the village center. But I just hesitate to impose a tax on one portion of the tax base for the purposes of merger when it's the entire community that is making this decision together. So that's all I wanted to say about the tax districts. Were there any other questions or comments about this proposal transitional document? Annie?
We are only in discussion, correct? We are taking 0 votes on any of this tonight.
0 votes.
Thank you.
Was
So
that
you-
your
so-
question? Okay.
So you're asking about the rest of the document?
Yes, Andy, please.
Yeah, okay. In section 105, the interim governing body in 105A, it says that the interim board shall hold bi-monthly meetings. And I'm just concerned that I know sometimes we will cancel meetings midsummer if there's no business. And I'm just wondering about requiring bi-monthly meetings. It's a small thing, but
Yep.
I think we do sometimes have less business and we cancel a summertime meeting.
Yep.
Can I move on to another topic? We're going to talk about water and sewer districts, another topic, so I'll bring that up there. Section 114 talks about repeals. And so one thing that I don't have clarity on is I've heard it said that we need to have a vote to dissolve the existing charter and then a vote to approve this. And I would like to get someone to let us know whether or not this line here is adequate to repeal both charters in a single vote for the merger, so that we don't have to. You don't end up with a charter dissolved or not dissolved and a merger approved. You could end up with, because you also, I believe, have to also vote to dissolve the town charter if that's the intent, is to have a whole new charter. You got to dissolve both of them and then have this approved. And I think if with this language in there, 114, I think that covers all three things that would need to happen for merger to be approved. And I don't know.
So you're saying if you vote to approve the new charter, which includes this language, then therefore you're implicitly also approving the dissolution of both the charters.
That's what I'm posing here. Yes.
That's kind of elegant.
I'd like to have somebody clarify if that's the case, because I know, George, you have said that there has to be another vote.
No, I no. Dan Richardson said it, and the Legislative Council said it. Dan Richardson and the Legislative Council, when we sent this down to them, they got back to us and specifically said, you have to follow the procedure of the town voting to cancel its existing charter. And
now exiting.
And so the village, and there's no way around it. I think this just affirms that. I understand exactly what you're saying, Andy. I don't understand why, if you put this in and we just vote for this, it doesn't automatically cancel it. But I'm telling you, as far as I understand right now, what they have said is that we need to follow the usual process of each municipal corporation voting to cancel its own charter and approve the new charter. And that's, we can reiterate it and get back to them.
Yeah, I think
right now that's
pointing out this specific language here. I think
I know.
I'd like to only have, if it can be in one vote, it would be nice. It would be good.
I know, but
Yeah,
that's what they've given us so far.
Yeah. The other thing, and I've talked to you about this before, George, is It's not actually in the document here, but in other charters that I've seen, it actually has explicitly said who votes. It'll and I guess you need to answer this question first about whether this repeal thing deals with all of the documents or not. And then I guess that leads to the question of who actually votes, now that I think about it, because people outside of the village cannot vote to dissolve the village charter. And I think I've talked myself right out of supporting this language here. But as I said, in other merger agreements or merger plans that I've read, it's explicitly said who votes and what they vote about. And I don't know if that language needs to be in here to make it clear so everybody knows, so that we're not answering that question of, the village gets to vote 3 times because they're voting for 2 charter dissolutions and a merger and a new part church. So just to make it explicit, I think it'd be cleaner to have it all documented clearly, and we could just point to it.
I agree.
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy. I had two other just technical questions. On it, Chapter 101, Section A.
Right.
It says all assets and obligations formerly owned or held by the town and village shall become the assets and obligations of the name of the municipality. But we need, it says later on in the paragraph, debts, claims, and bonded indebtedness. But we need to specifically state that the bonding debt that belongs to the village stays with the village taxpayers.
Right. But if you look further down, let me see, in section 104, it clarifies.
Yep. Okay. It does clarify, but it also says the opposite in that initial paragraph. So I just want to make it super clear in this charter that village debt stays with the village.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And then on page, section.
Elaine, can I interrupt you?
Of course.
I want to get back to, I just wanted to clarify something. So for example, if the village has employee contracts and those contracts have sick time, vacation time, that's a debt. That's an obligation that the village has. That that gets transferred to the new entity. So it's that kind of thing I think this is addressing, you see?
That's fine. For the folks like me who are not quite as smart as your average bear, just wanting to be able to explain very clearly, because that is always a thing that I'm hearing from town outside the village residents, that we don't want to pay the village's debts.
Yeah.
Just got to be clear.
Well, you're smarter than
Section 109, there is subparagraph E. It says all new employees hired after the effective date. It says employees are subject to the town employee manual and/or / their respective labor agreement. So is that saying that under a merged community we would still have two unions?
Is Evan still here?
Wake up, Evan.
I don't mean to. I could answer this, but Evan would do a better job. We still, the issue around the Village Employee Association and the town union, employees union, is tricky, and we cannot dissolve a union or an association with a charter. That's another issue. So we have to dance around it a little bit, and I'm going to let Evan maybe speak to it.
Well, George, you did a great job. You can dissolve a union or an association by a charter.
Right.
Those agreements last to the end of their terms, and the employees can choose one or the other. The other problem is the union cannot be the sole representative of something they have not been voted to do, which they have not in the village. So there's going to have to be some transition as to how those employees get brought in and when and their status. But that's why this language shows that we're going to keep their hire dates, we're going to keep their benefits and their stuff until that is brought into a new contract with the former association and the former union, and they can decide if they still want to be represented and how and by whom.
Okay.
I'm sure that
Totally.
It's difficult, but we've started conversations with AFSCME and the Village Association, and they've been made aware of that.
Okay. Thanks, Evan.
You're welcome.
I think if everyone has made all their thoughts and questions about this document, made us all aware of those, I'd like to know what the sense of the boards is in terms of next steps for this document. It feels like it needs another revision. And George, what was the thinking behind the next version of this document?
Well, I mean, the question is that, I mean, I think the overarching question is, do we want to continue the governance subcommittee? Max is leaving, so we're going to need to appoint a new member to replace Max, and it might be an opportunity to appoint 4 new members. I don't know about that. One alternative is it far enough along that we could just have, and I certainly don't want to volunteer myself. I'm not looking for work, but I could just work with Ann and staff and then just keep bringing changes and proposals and recommendations to the 2 full boards at joint meetings instead of us functioning as a separate subcommittee at this point. That's one recommendation. Or the 2 boards can continue the governance subcommittee. Really not my decision to make.
Annie?
I would cheerlead this concept I've just heard for the first time from George of him coming back with stuff. If there was opportunity for us to give input. No, I don't know. Okay, never mind. I'm gonna pause my statement. I think that George needs to be a thread. And thank you so much, George, for running for your seat again. I think that George's and Andy's, I don't know, never mind. I'm going to be quiet because I'm conflicted. Thank you.
Okay. Well, so George, you brought something up that I have a question about, and it's actually business item 6C, which is the future meeting schedule of the governance subcommittee.
Right.
With the board's agreement, we could slide right into that conversation and put the water sewer Q&A below that.
Yeah.
We'll need to vote to amend the agenda to do so.
Before we do that, I just think that we need to make sure there's an opportunity for the public to speak to the agenda item.
Right, exactly. So let's take a pause real quick. I'd like to hear from the boards whether you'd like to amend the agenda so that we can continue the discussion about the governance subcommittee, have that vote, and then open it to the public before we begin that conversation. Is that okay?
Fine by me.
Annie? Can you rephrase? Can you just say that one more time? I'm not staying with you.
So business item 6C is to discuss the governance subcommittee, and we kind of sort of picked it up and started talking about it, but we had another agenda item that's supposed to happen first. I'd like to amend the agenda so that we could switch them so that we could talk about it sooner, but we also have to build in time for the public to weigh in.
This is Sarah. Elaine, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Jim and Dennis are on the line to talk about the Q&A for water and sewer districts, so that may influence your decision.
Yeah. That will influence the decision. Thank you, Sarah, for reminding me. And Dennis and Jim, my apologies. We'll keep with the agenda. So have we, boards, wrapped up the conversation about the governance subcommittee memo for now?
Yes.
Thumbs up from Andrew?
Yes.
Okay.
Did
So
we
at
talk
this
about next steps for that? Because I didn't get any clarity from the discussion.
Well, yeah, Max, and so I think what we need to do is continue it when we discuss the governance subcommittee.
Okay.
Because, yeah, so can we hold on that thought until we get to that next agenda item?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay. So without further objection, I'm going to pause for 45 seconds so that we can wait to hear if any of the public wants to ask a question. Okay? Okay, so I've started a timer, and if there's anyone from the public who is listening or watching, does anyone have any comments to make? Make sure you unmute your microphone. Okay, hearing no requests from the audience, we're going to move to item 6B, discuss Q&A for water sewer district recommendations and public works infrastructure. And Jim Jutras and Dennis Less are with us. Thank you so much for your patience.
And I believe Ricky Jones is with us as well.
And Ricky, thank you. So, Greg, do you want to give us a quick overview?
Sure, this might actually be good to put George on the spot, but he might be best able to speak to this. Real quick intro is that it's a Q&A like we've done with some other issues that Ann has put together. The governance subcommittee has reviewed this. I'm just trying to get some basic information out there to residents about what might happen with, well, looking at how current municipal water and sewer systems work in municipalities and how that might change in the case of a merger. But George, Max, Raj, Andy, anyone else on the governance subcommittee, feel free to add to that.
No, I think you nailed it. I think we have to talk about the two systems in the transition charter and what's going to happen. And there are going to be a lot of questions. And we also saw questions from the survey about water and sewer. There's a lot of confusion about who pays for what and how it all gets paid for. And so Dennis and Jim and Ricky were very kind in putting this question, and others put this questionnaire together, this Q&A together, which we will put out as an informational piece.
I thought this was terrific. It seemed very clear and to the point, and I really appreciated that it was put together. I think our residents are really going to be pleased that they have this resource.
Yeah.
I have a quick observation to make, if that's okay with others. Under water utility and sewer utility, the last sentence in both paragraphs are, residents not on municipal water pay nothing, and residents not on municipal sewer pay nothing. But I would want to add something that says, residents not on municipal water pay nothing, but they have wells, the cost of which is their own responsibility. And residents not on municipal sewer pay nothing, but they have septic, the cost of which is their own responsibility. I have received comments from the public saying, you talk about how only people who use the water system have bills about the water system, but we have to pay for our own septic and we have to pay for our own wells. We should probably acknowledge that they have those costs as well. But otherwise, I think this is a really terrific document.
Sounds good.
This is Raj. I see your point. I'm just not sure why we would put that in this when we're talking about. I don't see the comparison, I guess.
Can I comment on that?
Andy?
People that have their own water systems and sewer and septic systems feel offended that we don't acknowledge that they pay for their own service, their own. If somebody's septic system fails, the town doesn't come help them fix it. Right. They pay for it for themselves, and they feel offended that they're not mentioned. And so I think we need to somehow acknowledge that they also have expenses that are associated with water and septic.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you, Andy.
I think that's
quick.
Not to. Can you guys hear me? Can I say
something?
Not to discredit what Andy is saying. Separate, but somewhat similar is. It's not always. There's a moment where every homeowner is going to pay for septic to a point. So if there's a problem between your home and where the village town, where the public works department piece ends, you pay for that. I know, because I'm in that boat. So it's not everything that's to do with my septic is not cared for by what I'm paying for. There are things toward my home. Am I confused, Andy?
Yeah, you don't have a septic system. You have a sewer system.
Sewer, my bad. But there are things as a homeowner.
But the hookup is hers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm in a very expensive boat right now that I have to pay for between my home and where the the line that's covered by the village ends. And so it's just to make sure that we're 100%, I'm not discrediting your point. I'm just also saying it's not all umbrellaed.
Right. I think we're just trying to differentiate the fact that in addition to our personal hookups to whatever system we happen to be connected to, there is also municipal sewer or septic.
Correct.
And so the people who pay for their own septic would appreciate that acknowledgement.
If it adds clarity, why don't we put it in?
It's a simple fix.
Can I make a suggestion? I have no problem with the wording to go in there, but I do think you could also put, for example, under both of them, the way it's worded now, residents not on municipal water pay nothing towards the enterprise fund. They pay for their own water system or their own septic system. But the key is they're not paying anything towards the enterprise system as opposed to they pay nothing. They do pay something, but they don't pay towards these funds, and that's the key word. So I would kind of add that in as a further clarification and then go on to say those residents have their own systems, and I don't think that changes anything.
And
that's
one
a
other
great
thing.
clarification, Dennis. Thank you.
Yep.
And one other thing, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Ricky.
Oh, hi. How are you doing? One like Annie's point. She's correct as far as that point. The service line from her house to the municipal main is the homeowner's responsibility. So if something fails in that, then that's going to be her bill to flip. So that's, and that adds up. We've seen that over the years. So that's another thing to put in. But I like Dennis's points too.
Yeah, because if you say towards the enterprise fund, it's very clear that fund only pays for certain services, and that if they're on septic, they're paying for their own. So I would add both the suggestion that Elaine made and the suggestion I just made, and put it in the wording under the appropriate end sentence there in both paragraphs.
Right, but I just want to make sure that people know that municipal services in the village, and I'm assuming the town too, Dennis.
Same way.
If you're on the municipal system, there is some money they got to spend if they have a problem with their system. It's not like it's all covered by the village or town. So there's a section there. If that line fails, they got to dig in a street. You're looking at $5 to $10 grand easily. So that's
Would it be
another thing.
Would it be worthwhile to include a sentence that just says, hookup from the residents to the municipal infrastructure is the responsibility of the homeowner?
I would say so. Just to make it fair for everybody, so that everybody knows what everybody's paying for.
Right. Ricky has his numbers exactly right. Thank you, Ricky.
It always does.
You're welcome.
Greg, is that a change that you would make? Are you the keeper of this document?
Ann's the holder of the keeper of the document, but I will pass on the message.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any? Yeah.
Yeah, just one other recommendation is just based on that first public gathering we had at Essex Middle School. There was a question at our table about, does this mean that the sewer system would be expanded to those who don't have it currently in a merged environment? So unless I missed that somewhere in this document, being explicit on that would be helpful as well.
That's a little harder to explain in a short document, because when the town got its, and I won't get into a long lengthy thing, it's late at night, but when the town got its grant for the sewer system, one of the requirements that came with it from getting the federal money, that we establish a limit, and we have a sewer core that's limited, so that that expansion is limited within that sewer core unless the elected officials decide to expand that core, and that core is tied to capacity. So it's very difficult to make some generalization about the future of the sewer system when essentially, at least in the town, one hand is tied behind your back. So I'd be very careful about putting statements in about expansion of the sewer core or expansion of the sewer system. We don't have that limitation on water. Water could expand anywhere, but the systems are user pays for them, so you could write 3 pages on who pays for it and why it's paid for and how it came about to be. But that's going to be very difficult to explain in a couple-page document.
But I think you could come out and say that a merged water sewer entity does not equate to an expansion of such services.
You're kind of leading them to the point where, can it or can't it? And it can, under certain conditions. It could be expanded, and there's no intent to do that, I don't think, on anyone's part, but it could. So and we can think about with some wording that we might be able to come up with for that, but I'll tell you, it's a slippery slope to go on. The village doesn't have that problem because its utilities extends pretty much to its boundaries of the community, and the wording we put in here would allow for an orderly expansion of the system if, and I forget the exact wording, but it's back in the beginning, where it doesn't discount that, but it also doesn't say it's encouraged either. It's pretty much silent.
I guess what I would say is between Dennis, Jim, and Ricky, if the 3 of you can come up with a sentence, great. If you can't, then there's probably nobody in this planet who would be able to come up with such a sentence that would be accurate. So I would defer to that.
We'll see if we can come up with something that might fit. It'll be difficult, but let's see what we can do.
Any other comments or questions about the sewer and water Q&A?
Yeah, it's Andy. I brought this up when this was discussed with the governance subcommittee. The question I have, or I'd like to consider, is some more discussion about rates. I know, every time that the select board is asked to set the rate for town outside the village, we're shown a table that shows where our water and sewer costs are relative to other municipalities. And Essex Junction is always very low on the list, and Essex outside the village is always higher than the average. And this comes into the category of something that could be given up. My question is whether those rates could be brought to be more equal. It may be considered as a trade for the tax increase for the town outside the village. I've said this before in a select board meeting. It costs me more to take a shower than it does Raj, because both my water and my sewer rates are much higher. And if I take the average 120 gallon a day user, I pay $269 more than somebody in the village using the exact same amount of water. So I'm interested to see whether we could bring those rates closer together. I realize there may be some debt that would drive them to be separate for some time, not exactly equal. But I'd like this to be considered as a possible bone to throw to offset some of the tax increase. I know it's not going to be a big amount, but it could be something that the village gives up, per my prior conversation.
This is Raj. Wasn't a fair amount of that, I have to go back through my notes, I mean, it's on the spot, but wasn't a fair amount of that debt related? And as far as the giving up, going back to the first hour and a half of the conversation around, extending out services remaining in the village is something in lieu of, a tax reduction for village residents as part of merger. I think, keeping a lot of the expenses and taxes around sidewalk and capital and everything else that we discussed earlier, those ought to be considered, not just something to reduce the town outside the village taxes, but also something the village is kind of giving up in terms of holding on to expenses that in a merger situation they might not otherwise. But I'm curious from the group, from maybe George or Dennis, if you could review really quickly where the disparity in the rates comes from for water.
Water is not that far apart. I'm at home, so I don't have that material with me. Water is not that far apart. Champlain Water District, we usually use they publish a list of rates, and we try to grab the sewer rates from the neighboring communities. Neither of them are really far apart. The town is kind of mid-range. I guess I'd disagree with Andy. We're not at the high range. We're mid-range. The village is lower. The problems with doing this, and I've got to go back to Sarah's dilemma, because it's not just what's in the rates. If you were to manage this as a single system, you're designing a management system from scratch that's structured totally different than what either the towns look like or the village looks like. A lot of our costs are due to salaries, and some of those salaries are how you're going to set that rate in the future isn't, say, let's pick apart today's rate. It's not the same. We all get the same rate charged from Champlain Water District for the wholesale rate. We get the same wholesale rate from the village, and then we put on our retail rate. But that retail rate is going to be totally different under merged community because those resources will be combined. We may not need as many employees in one community or other doing water and sewer. We may use some of those employees to share in the wintertime to do plowing. I mean, I can envision a point in the wintertime we may only need probably two employees on to handle 6,000 or 7,000 customers. And Ricky and I have talked about this a little. And the other employees would be freed up to do water and sewer. That's a lot less than we're using in the winter now for a single community. But we've not gone to design that system before we find out if we're going to merge or not, because there's a significant amount of work to try to figure out what is that future structure going to look like. And it isn't just buying of chemicals, it's how many vehicles do you need, and all of that's going to be wrapped into a different organization that's going to have different costs. And now to try to go back to say, well, how could we make them equal? You've got to actually do all that forward work and say, we're going to design what that new Public Works, Water, and Sewer Department is going to look like today, and I'm not sure we're prepared to do that. And if you can't do that, you can't come up with a cost that says, well, let's make them equal. That's the dilemma. It's kind of cart and horse, and which comes first.
Could I also chime in? And I thank you, Dennis. It's George, and I very well said, and I that's great, and I appreciate it. I'd also add that even if you could do something like this, it only benefits a relatively, I don't know how many people in the town outside the village.
3,300 or so.
It's not unlike the other kinds of benefits we're talking about in terms of tax revenue. It wouldn't be a benefit for everybody in the town.
But it might be enough to get people to vote and pass it, right? It's a bone you could throw. That's just suggesting that. Again, it's just me.
Yep.
I'm not saying we couldn't look at that and come up with, what might it look like, but I would not really want to put that into a document, because then it forces you into a situation that people are saying, oh, they've already got a plan. This is going to look like exactly as we merge. And I don't think anybody's prepared to go there yet.
Yeah. No, I agree with Dennis. Let's not get in the weeds on this thing. We've got about the same amount of water customers. We probably should wait and talk to me about this document. It's more of a bigger general thing. I don't think we should get in the weeds and start doing this kind of stuff, my opinion.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Dennis or Ricky about this document?
I do not. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Pat or Max?
This is Max. I'm good. Yeah, I want to thank them for pulling this together.
Okay.
I'm good as well.
All right. if the trustees also have no further comments, we can open it up for the public.
Trustees?
I'm all set.
All right. Members of the public, if anyone has questions or comments on this particular item, please let us know. Unmute your mic. Andy, you should get your ukulele out while we're doing this.
No. Rick says no until he gets Guns N' Roses going.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I've been working on Guns N' Roses for you, Ricky.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding.
Okay.
But I hear you're not.
Which one?
Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Yes. Awesome.
I will stay an extra half an hour for that.
Is that really Guns N' Roses, though? That's an old song.
It's Guns N' Roses. Well, they do it.
Hey. They do it.
Okay,
right.
so hearing nothing from the public at this moment, we're going to move on to item 6C, future meeting schedule of the subcommittee. Dennis and Ricky and Jim, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. I'm sure we entertained you.
You certainly did, and my wife keeps giving me this nod saying, like, are they done? Are they done? No, but I am. Good night.
We'll give her our best.
Night, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
I appreciate doing it from home, guys. This worked out great for me.
Good thing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ricky.
Dennis Lutz.
Okay.
Is now exiting.
All right. So we can return to our conversation about the
Rick Jones.
Yep.
Is
We
now
can return to our
exiting.
conversation about the next steps for the governance subcommittee and the transitional document. George had made a possible suggestion of working on the document with Anne. So let's talk about the governance subcommittee and what we want to do next with this document. George, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I would, and let George add that he would absolutely not be offended if someone else says, that's a terrible idea, we want someone else to do this. I guarantee you, I cannot tell you how deeply I mean this. I will not be offended if you did that. Okay? I'm happy to do it, but absolutely thrilled to have someone else do it. I'd like the other 3 subcommittee members to chime in and what they think should happen. Really, totally needs to be a group decision here, guys. Thanks. Sorry to prolong it all, but, whatever you guys decide.
I would really like to hear what the rest of the committee members have to say about this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pick someone. Max?
Well, you're talking about future meetings, so I don't know if I really have a lot to add there. It's up to you guys.
Consider this your governance subcommittee exit interview.
Well, when there's chunks of work that need to be done, I think it works better in a subcommittee to be able to formulate something and then to bring it back to the overall boards to work on. But I think we're at a point where maybe that all that heavy lifting is maybe been done, and it might be time for just the for these final decisions to be made that can only be made by the joint boards to just do that. And if there are little things, then maybe having George work with Anne while she's still here to get the information together. But again, I kind of hate saying what you should do in the future. I'm not going to be part of that heavy lifting, doing that heavy lifting.
Understood. Andy?
Sorry, I'm just responding to somebody saying that they haven't been able to speak during public to be heard. So I don't know what their problem is.
Oh,
but,
are they dialing in on the phone or are they watching on channel 17?
I don't know.
Andrew, where are they speaking to you? Is it in the chat
no, I got an email, so it's hard to respond to while I'm and participate in the meeting. So, I guess to answer the question here, I tend to agree with George and Max. I think we've done a lot of the framework for what we need. I think, if I'm perfectly honest, George has done most of the authoring of this document that we have anyway. We have had discussions at the smaller group level and made modifications to it. But if I go back 2 years to my position I had before we formed this subcommittee, I was against forming the subcommittee and thought it should be done by the boards. So I'm in favor of having a single author come forward to both boards with further updates. And I'm happy for it to be George.
Raj?
George has put so much time and effort into this already. I wish you could see my smile.
I know where you're going with this. So you're not, yeah, okay.
I, however, would be happy to help. George has put, as Andy said, a lion's share of the actual authorship into this. So I feel bad asking him to continue without having some help with that. So if there's any way I can help you with that, I just think most of, like Andy said, most of the nuts and bolts are there. I don't know that there's a lot left for the governance subcommittee to do, although it may be more efficient as we approach hour 4 of a joint meeting. Doing this as boards may be less efficient than doing it as the Gov sub, hour 4. So I would love to see it wrap up. I think maybe it's only got 1 or 2 more meetings to get everything settled, and then the boards can hash out the nitty gritty edits, perhaps, or something like that.
Okay.
I'm wondering in the absence of the subcommittee, if George works on it with Ann, but Andy, as a representative of the select board, the remaining representative of the select board, if you would be willing to at least review it as well for a select board perspective, so that we have a member of each board
that makes
doing
sense.
that work.
That does make sense. Yes.
Okay.
I would be willing to do that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Although you've been listening to my comments all evening.
I have, but it sounds also like we're starting to say that perhaps the governance subcommittee has fulfilled its purpose and can be set aside for a while, or just we no longer use it for the purpose it's been used for, and because we had asked the subcommittee to do a great deal of legwork, and all of that legwork is done. And both iterations of the subcommittee have done enormous amounts of research. And now we're at the point where the decisions all have to be made at the board level. But that said, there's still a little bit of workmanship that has to happen to that document. So if perhaps George is willing to take the lead with Ann and Andy, then a revision can come back to us more rapidly than waiting for another subcommittee meeting.
Yeah. I'd be willing to do that. I think that's good. And I think that, under the circumstances, with staff, with their hands full, with the health, the healthcare crisis, and everything else, I think it's the less committee stuff we have going on to have to schedule, and they have to be at, the better. So I think that's a good thing. I'll just work with Ann and Andy, and we'll get it done. I think it's really just tightening. I've got a lot of notes, and I'll get the notes from others, from Greg. And we'll buff it up, and it's probably just be much more efficient for Andy and I to bounce it around and then come to you guys for final decisions on language. And take it from there instead of trying to have more subcommittee meetings. Good?
Okay.
Okay.
Is that agreeable to everybody?
100%.
It is for me, and I appreciate Andy and George doing this.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
It sounds exactly right to me.
So then are we in agreement that we're sort of mothballing the governance subcommittee for the time being and until it's needed again, not necessarily disbanding the group, but not needing it for now.
Yes, absolutely.
We're on home confinement.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Not
It worked
going
out
anywhere.
well, I suppose.
I was trying to figure out how to draft Max as a special envoy to the to take care of it, but that didn't work.
Yeah. Well,
Good try, Raj.
then this is kind of the end of a really excellent process. And I would like to thank George and Max and Andy and Raj for the inordinate amount of hours that you've put into it. And thank you for taking it so seriously and doing so much work and getting us so far down the road. We could not have gotten together as much as we have without you. So thank you.
Thank you. No problem.
And special thanks to George and Ann for doing a lot of the writing.
And Anne, absolutely. Greg and Evan, if you would please convey our deep appreciation to Anne for how much work she's done with the committee. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm hearing that there's members of the public that can't get through.
Yeah,
So,
they say pressing *6 is not unmuting them. So I don't know, Greg, if as the organizer, is any way you can unmute people? Or
I have not had luck with it, but let me try again. Is it the two cell phone numbers that are there?
one of those two, I'm not sure which one.
the other option is that those viewers can go into channel 17 and put a comment in the chat box. And then, I mean, I've got channel 17 open. I will see the comment if it pops up. And I've seen there's two people who have made some comments, but they're not questions. So if people who are listening can open up channel 17 online, they can make comments.
Looks like somebody's gone off mute here.
That's me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, finally, the *6 thing's working. I tried that before, but I think everybody was speaking and you probably couldn't hear me.
Great, Ken. Thank you for your patience.
For the record, can we get your name, please, Ken?
Ken Signorello, you know me and I know you.
Thank you.
All right. So, oh my gosh, you guys have covered so much ground tonight. A lot of work. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So, going back to the sewer and water hookup room, just very quickly. So I'm a rural person and have a well and a septic. I pay for my hookup to my well and my hookup to my septic system, and I pay for my well and my septic system. I recognize that folks that are on town or village water pay for their hookup. I pay for my hookup as well. I think that'll be it. I'll try to not add anything else to the fire. You guys have burned a lot of midnight oil.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Is anybody else from the public wanting to contribute? I'm going to give it another 30 seconds. Okay, so the final business item we have to discuss is the strategic advance and a potential new date. So Greg and Evan, you're on.
All right, let me just jump to that section of the packet. So we had been planning a strategic advance for May 2nd. I think it's safe to say we should probably postpone that at this point with everything that's going on with coronavirus. Hope you had a chance to take a look at the proposed agenda. We'll take feedback on that, and we can adjust that once we have a new date rescheduled. But generally speaking, it was another chance for us to check in almost a year after the first strategic advance, and just check in on where we're going, what we're doing, goals for the coming year. We had Anne had reached out to a couple of elected officials in other towns. Liz Gamache is the former mayor of St. Albans, and Seth Leonard, the former mayor of Winooski, so they could talk a bit about their experiences just in terms of leading the community, especially in times of change and transition. Not quite exactly the same as merger, but they've got some experience that they would be willing to share. And that's just a bit from me. If Evan can chime in if he has anything to add.
No, we just, like we talked about a little bit, you know, coronavirus is kind of taking all of our thoughts and energy as it should. And I don't know if we're going to be allowed to meet early May. So we wanted to be able to not only get our heads together about what date might work, but also take a look at this agenda, get your comments moving forward. And as we've all kind of realized, you know, mergers been important, but over maybe the next month or two, as we go through this really life-changing issues, merger's not really at the top of the list of what we're doing right now. So we could put this off a month easily.
Evan, do you have a sense of dates later on in May and June that work for your staff that we can look at some point?
Well, the only people that were going to be there from staff was going to be myself, Greg, Sarah, and Ann. So I don't know Ann's availability after the middle of the month. Right. But it's more important that we get 9 out of 10 board members than a couple of staff members.
So will Ann be sending out a doodle to reschedule?
We certainly can. If people could tell us specific dates that are, it's going to try to be on a Saturday. If somebody could tell us specific dates in late May or June that just do not work, that would be beneficial.
June 13th is high school graduation.
That would be one. So.
High school graduation is probably not going to be occurring this year.
Yikes.
They're going to have to do another year, Pat?
I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but I was
that's too bad.
Earlier in the meeting, I'll admit it, I was cheating on you all. I was dual meeting.
What?
Because we were, yeah, we had a school board meeting earlier, so I had 2 screens up.
I think that's
right. But all extracurriculars, all coming up. I mean, the thought is for Beth that it's most likely that we're not coming back into school this year, and as such, any extracurricular activities, graduations, and whatnot would also not be occurring. So it's, people's schedules, nothing's confirmed yet, but people's schedules are probably wide open, at least as far as the schools are concerned.
Wow.
We will send out a doodle poll for June and July.
That would probably be wise.
That's probably better.
Sounds good.
Please take a look. It's been a late night. Take a look at the proposed agenda and send me comments, please.
Okay.
Yep. Offline.
Yep. Okay, we've made it through the business items. Andrew, do you want to take over from there?
Sure. That brings us into the consent agenda, which this is only for the trustees, as it appears the select board, you've already approved the minutes. So if someone would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Andrew, hang on.
Hey-o.
Aye.
Is this the?
Hold on. Recalling that.
I'm just looking for the minutes. Oh, well, never mind. I had a correction for our minutes. Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah, that came and went, Raj.
Our minutes excluded me from that doesn't matter. continue with your motion.
All right. So the motion's on the table. It's been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. So that goes to the consent agenda. Into the reading file. Elaine, if you don't mind, with board member comments, if we want to open it up to trustees first.
Go right ahead.
We can do this the same process from the trustees. I've got nothing new to add tonight. George, do you want to go next?
I don't have any comments about anything in the reading file. Sorry.
This would be general comments, not necessarily just a reading file.
Okay, I don't want to prolong the evening. One thing, I just want to share a thought since Evan was asking about it's a strategic advance. One thing I was going to recommend they put in there is the merger vote that's planned for November. I would like us to think of having some kind of exit polling. So in case the vote is negative, I'd like to know why, instead of this normal thing that happens when a vote doesn't go a certain way and we all go, well, what happened? And there's a million different explanations, because after all the work we've done and the effort we put into this, if merger fails in November, I would like to know why. I'd like to try to figure out as best we can to have some specific understanding of exactly why it failed. That's my only thought. So just put that out there.
Thank you for that thought.
Yep.
Evan, if you don't mind adding that to a future agenda, that'd be helpful. Next on the faces, I see Raj.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Amber, we'll go to you.
Nothing to add.
And finishing up with Dan.
I have nothing to add.
Elaine, it's all yours.
Thank you. Select Board, any comments?
Elaine, this is Max.
Yep.
I didn't speak up before, but when you're talking about the strategic advance, and I think item number 5, it says on the agenda, non-binding resolution to continue merger vote effort. Is that a go, no-go kind of thing? Because this pandemic is certainly turning the world upside down. And as we heard from Sarah, it's very difficult on some families to just try to function normally. So I don't know what their bandwidth is to take in information about mergers. So I think you might want to think about what a go, no-go date might be. It might be, getting the document already, and before you hand it over to Dan Richardson, maybe, take an assessment of where the community is and their ability to be able to, to really give this the thought that it needs. So I'm just thinking that at the strategic advance, or maybe before that, you want to have a go, no-go kind of decision to think.
I agree.
Okay, and then if I still have the floor, then this is my last meeting. So I just, it's a very strange feeling for me being doing this for for 12 years. So I just want to thank everybody for their support and camaraderie and friendship, and we did a lot of hard work, but it was wonderful to work with such a great group of elected officials and staff. I just wish things were a little bit different and we could go out for a cold beverage after.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
We'll just hold that thought until we are allowed to again, and then we'll definitely do that.
All right, we'll just get a rain check on that.
We could get them to go.
Exactly.
Get them to go. Zoom celebration.
Well, there are self-isolating cocktail hours going around. I don't know if you've seen those on Facebook. We could do that.
Apparently, Patrick has 3 of them going on another screen right now.
Cheers to you, Max.
Max, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love. Glad to do it for. It was an honor that to be trusted with this responsibility, and I enjoyed it. It's particularly meeting so many wonderful people.
Right back at you.
You're leaving big shoes to fill.
Thank you so much, Max.
And we know where you live.
Yeah, and if you ever want to have a sounding board of any kind, Elaine, I'd be more than happy to be at your service.
Thank you, Max. I'll take you up on that
Okay.
when we're allowed.
Great.
Any other comments or questions from the select board? Hearing none, and we do not need to do an executive session tonight, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
All those in favor on the select board of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Doug.
Trustees,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Anybody
Good night,
opposed?
all. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Evan.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night,
everybody. Thank you.